Aloha kakahiaka, everyone. It's 9:02 a.m. Will the Committee on Budget please come to order? I'd like to welcome Committee Vice Chair Nishimoto, Councilmember Cordero participating remotely, Councilmember āina here in the chambers. Committee Member Weyer is excused for the time being. And then we also have Councilmember Tupola participating and listening in remotely. For the members who are participating remotely by video conference, that is Councilmember Cordero as well as Councilmember Tupola, in accordance with Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, please identify each person who is with you at your location.
Hi, just me.
Hi, good morning. I'm alone. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And pursuant to Section 92-3.7 Hawaii Revised Statutes, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony on all items on the agenda in two ways, remotely and in person in the council chamber. Remote and in-person oral testimony will be allowed when the agenda item is taken up. As both English and Hawaiian are official languages of the state of Hawaii, pursuant to Article 15, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution and Section 1-13, HRS, members of the public may testify in either language. For oral testimonies offered in Olelo, Hawaii, additional time as may be necessary will be allowed for the testifier to provide an English translation of their testimony. Before testifying, each person shall state their name. Each speaker may not have anyone else read their statement and is limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. All persons who have registered to testify in person will be called upon first. When your name is called, please come up to the testifier podium. Persons who did not register will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. Once in-person testimony has concluded, I'll proceed to remote testimony via video conference or phone. When your name is called, please monitor your screen and activate your audio feed when prompted. I'll then give persons who have not registered an opportunity to offer testimony. Please utilize the raise hand feature in Zoom to be called upon. For those joining by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. I'll identify you by the last 3 digits of your phone number. When your number is called, please press *6 to unmute yourself when prompted. Some friendly reminders and tips: video conference from a quiet location if possible. If you're watching the proceedings on Olelo, please mute your television at the time you're called to testify. And when the timer on screen reaches 0, please conclude your remarks promptly. HRS Section 92-3.7 requires all votes in remote meetings to be conducted by roll call unless unanimous. Therefore, I'll first call for objections, and if there are any, I'll call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside the council chamber, this is important. In accordance with HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audiovisual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, for council members Cordero and Tupola, please announce beforehand if you're voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described in the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. I'd like to welcome Councilmember Weyer as well to the meeting. And before we begin, members, the following disclosure of interest statement was filed with the City Clerk's office after the agenda was posted. Council Communication 48, a disclosure of interest statement submitted by Council Chair Waters regarding Bill 17 relating to real property taxation. All right, we have a packed agenda today, so I'd like to move through these things so we can give ample time, especially for Bill 60. But in the meantime, we'll dive right in. The first item is Bill 3 of 2025. This amends Chapter 35 ROH 2021 to address certain obsolete or unnecessary provisions. We have from the administration, Director Kawano.
Good morning, Budget Chair Dos Santos-Tam, Honorable Council Members, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. With regard to the resolution, with regard to Bill number 3, the administration and BFS does not have any issues, and we support the passing of the bill.
Okay, members, any questions? Okay, seeing none. Clerks, is there anyone registered to testify on this item, either in person or online, or standing by either in the chamber or remotely to testify on this item?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion on Bill 3 of 2025. Okay, sensing no discussion, the chair recommends that Bill 3 of 2025 be reported out for passage on third reading. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none. Sorry. Okay, hearing none, so ordered. The next item is Bill 4 of 2025, CD1. This is to reestablish a process to obtain sponsorships for city facilities, parks, programs, equipment, and tangible property within set guidelines and procedures for the purpose of optimizing non-property tax revenue sources. Members, we do have a posted CD2 transmitted by Mayor's Message 31 and proposed by myself. For your information, the amendments are listed on the agenda. And before we begin, for complete transparency and to set the stage for our discussion today, my recommendation will be to amend to the proposed CD2 transmitted by Mayor's Message 31, and then to postpone action on the bill to a time and date to be determined by myself to allow for further discussion amongst the stakeholders. If the measure were to pass out of this committee, it would go to full council for third reading. And so for third reading, we want to make sure that we're providing the best bill possible, and that requires input from everybody who's involved. Do we have anyone from the administration who'd like to say something? All right, we have the Deputy Managing Director.
Good morning, Budget Chair and Council members. Krishna Jayram, Deputy Managing Director. We hear loud and clear from Council the need to look at other sources of revenues. We're strongly in support of this, this bill, and I'm here for any questions Council members may have. Thank you.
Okay, members, any questions for the Deputy Managing Director? I see Councilmember Cordero.
Aloha, Deputy Managing Director. Thank you very much for your letter. I do have a question relating to the ability to have different agencies have certain requirements, but not all of the agencies are the same. So with that, we know that rulemaking may or may not be a part of the process, but with different agencies, once again, not being the same, how will we determine the semblance of continuity throughout the agencies? Or are we just going to be making different amendments to ordinances that in that manner? What's your thoughts?
Councilmember, thank you for that question. So I think you're referring to the fact that one proposal is that we make rulemaking not a requirement but an option. And to the extent, this is a discussion that I am having with Corporation Council to determine whether rulemaking is or isn't necessary. But in terms of consistency, I believe that the ordinance as drafted does provide a lot of consistency in terms of how the different departments and agencies need to approach this process. I hope that's responsive to your question.
Okay, so that would be to reiterate through ordinance amendments to the ordinance.
So Councilmember, I would try not to seek amendments to the ordinance. I think that would be perhaps legislatively burdensome. I believe that right now that the ordinance is fairly extensive and gives us a great deal of guidance on what we can and can't do. To the extent that this bill proves in the future to be not as effective as we hope, then we could come forward and have a discussion with the council on what might make it more effective.
Okay, mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other questions? Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. Mahalo, Deputy Managing Director. I was just curious if the administration had any position on the testimony that came up last time regarding having submissions maybe be submitted for comment to the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission.
Thank you, Vice Chair, for that question. I was present when the testifier spoke about that possibility, and I think it is very important that we make sure that the sponsorships that might flow from this bill don't impact programs, buildings, things that are culturally and historically significant to us. I believe, and this is a discussion per the chair's comments about we need to vet this and talk this through more, the sponsorship bill as drafted covers, for example, what we can and can't do with signs. And I believe and I know that there's also ordinances that say what we can and can't do with the naming of city facilities. I don't believe that either of those need to be separately handled through another process, but this is a discussion worth having. If there's something that we are concerned about that does need to go to Oahu Historic Preservation Commission, that was stood up by this council and this mayor, so I'd be happy to figure that out. But right now, I'm not sure whether that extra step is entirely necessary, so that's a discussion.
Okay, well, and just to make sure, so I'm hearing that under the actual naming ordinance, which would work in conjunction with the sponsorship ordinance, that there's additional safeguards and evaluation, particularly in cultural context?
So correct, particularly with respect to park facilities, et cetera, that's a council decision whether, how to name it. And so it would always come back to council, but we will take another look through and see if there's other maybe culturally or historically significant programs or buildings that maybe doesn't get captured, and we can have that discussion. We'll make sure of that.
Okay, I appreciate that. And just asking, because I do think we don't want to necessarily slow down processes, but I just asked because I did think it was a good idea to at least have the proposals at least be submitted to the commission, and then of course they could opt to weigh in if they deemed so, but appreciate the feedback. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember āina.
Thank you. I appreciate Councilmember Weyer's bringing that up. I just want to, remind ourselves that that was not the intent of the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission. First off, they and any other commission can opine whenever they want. So I don't believe that it is our job to have to. So if members want to send it to them and share with them, I think that's the case. But that was a very difficult commission to stand up, and I think that it was never intended to be an impediment to processes, because that was one of the concerns that was expressed by stakeholders. So thank you.
Thank you. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none at this time, what we'll do is we'll go to in-person testifiers. In-person testifiers on Bill 4, I see we have Winston Welch, who's registered, and he's here in the chambers.
Good morning, council members. Yes, the Outdoor Circle appreciates this opportunity to testify. My name is Winston Welch. I'm Executive Director of the Outdoor Circle. For the record, we'd like to thank Councilmember Dos Santos-Tam and Councilmember Cordero, as well as the Managing Director's Office for their discussions with us. We stand on our testimony submitted for this CD2. There's basically 4 main points here. One is that we do need rules. We suggest that rules be made in conjunction with DPP so that we don't run afoul of any signage laws, whatever other organization is or department is considered with that. And that is actually important. Number 2, we consider, in line with the Star Advertiser, that we clarify language for signage. So we have suggested a merger of clauses 2 and 7 under, I think it's A, that strengthens that language. Number 3, just to address the last point, naming rights should be excluded from this bill. If the Managing Director's Office has indicated that's not something we want to have, so we should be careful to do that right now. And lastly, we would like a time max on this of 5 years. That's our suggestions for this, but especially the naming rights, I think we should take care to, especially what the oral testimony was last time of the Ko'olau Foundation, as well as our testimony.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions for the Executive Director of the Outdoor Circle?
Chair,
Yes. Please proceed.
I have a question relating to the time lapse of 5 years. May I ask the testifier to please elaborate on that further?
Sure.
I'm sorry, can you say it again?
May I ask for the elaboration on the time lapse of 5 years?
Oh, inside of this proposal of the CD2, it says that it can be over 5 years if approved by the council, but we would suggest that a 5-year cap be put in place for all of these potential sponsorships, and that it could be subject to renewal, such that, if we're giving a sponsorship to somebody for 25 or 30 years, then that effectively becomes the brand of that entity. So it gives a chance to reassess, to reevaluate if it's financially working, and perhaps put it out for bid again or something along those lines.
Okay, mahalo.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, sensing none, thank you. Is there anyone else in the chamber who'd like to testify on this item? Okay, clerks, is there anyone standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Cordero, since you're the sponsor of this bill, do you have any items for discussion on this?
First off, I want to thank Deputy Managing Director for providing that input and for allowing discussion with myself. And I appreciate the discussion that we've had. I know that the motion is to postpone to a future time and date to be determined by you, Chair, so I support that. I know there's a few things that others have brought up that we can definitely look at. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. Members, any other discussion? Okay, seeing none, again, as stated, my recommendation is to amend to the proposed CD2 transmitted by Mayor's Message 31 and proposed by myself. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Okay, seeing none, so ordered. And again, this gives us the opportunity to have a clean version that we can have for further discussion, because I do think we're fairly close to coming up with something that makes sense overall for the city's needs, as well as protecting the interests of the community and the concerns that have been raised by the Outdoor Circle. So the bill having been amended, the chair recommends that action on Bill 4 of 2025 CD2 be postponed to a date and time to be determined by the chair. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. All right, thanks everyone. Now we're on agenda item number 3. This is Bill 9 of 2025, directing the Office of Council Services to prepare a consolidated table of fees and charges found in the revised ordinances of Honolulu 2021 and to insert the table in the revised ordinances of Honolulu 2021. Members, we do have a posted proposed CD1 submitted by Councilmember Weyer, which is listed on the agenda. Councilmember Weyer, do you want to make any remarks about your proposed draft?
Thank you, Chair, and fully support the bill. I think appreciate the goal of, I think, transparency and also just having accessible information, understanding that some of these changes or adjustments or even process may be outside even the official public process, you know, if we're looking at rulemaking and discussions that occur. And so just wanted to make sure that, you know, the folks directly affecting and implementing the changes in fees are the ones that can, you know, submit that update so that OCS has the information to ensure that it's accurate and up to date.
Thank you. All right, this being a council initiated item, we don't have anyone registered from the administration, but would anyone from the administration like to opine? Okay, seeing none. Very well, we'll proceed with testimony. Clerks, do we have anyone either in person, registered, or standing by?
Chair, there are none.
And then clerks, is there anyone registered or standing by online?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion on this item. Any discussion?
Chair.
Yes, Councilmember Cordero.
In full support, and I can't wait to see that this will be kept up to date. And I do want to thank the Councilmember Weyer for doing this. And I just want to know how often we will see this, because we know we do rulemaking for year-round, and this will be updated numerous or continuously throughout the year.
Thank you. That's a very good question. My understanding is that this will be updated by the clerk's office whenever there is a change, but it will be published quarterly with the regular updates to OCS Online. Members, now any other questions? I do have a question with regard to changes that are made in rulemaking. What is the process to notify us? Councilmember Weyer, do you know what that is, since your draft kind of discusses that? What is the current process?
I think it varies by rule.
Okay.
And also by the type of fee.
Okay, very well. Since it varies, I think it makes sense to incorporate Councilmember Weyer's recommendations to create a standard process for us to be notified. I think it is useful for us and the public to know when such fee updates have been made. And so in that case, the chair recommends that Bill 9 of 2025 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2025-0155/2/24/2025 2:03 Any discussion, objections, or reservations to recommendation to amend? There being none, the bill has been amended to a CD1. The chair then recommends that Bill 9, 2025 CD1 be reported out for passage on third reading. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Great. Thanks, everyone. Okay. Up next is agenda item number 4. This is Bill 15 of 2025, creating a fund to receive and expend monies to support climate resiliency. Members, we do have a proposed posted CD1 submitted by Councilmember Weyer. For your information, the amendments are listed on the agenda. Councilmember Weyer, would you like to talk about your proposed CD1?
Of course, Chair, and just briefly. So understanding that Bill 15 in its original form is attempting to create a cesspool conversion fund utilizing the Climate Resilience Fund. The amendment, our proposed committee draft, would include sewer hookup fees to that, which I think is particularly relevant in some of the projects the city is working on to increase sewer access. Mahalo.
Okay, thank you. We have from the administration, Director Kawano from Budget and Fiscal Services. We also have the Executive Director of the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability, and Resiliency, as well as the Director Designate of the Department of Environmental Services. Director Kawano, I guess, is going first.
Good morning, Budget Chair Dos Santos-Tam, Honorable Council Members, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. Want to thank you for allowing us to discuss Bill 15 with you. The voters clearly supported setting up this fund for climate resiliency based on our current real property tax revenue estimates. We're looking at about $9 million per year, added to the fund. I just wanted to point out that, our climate resiliency needs for this island are significant, and the ultimate cost to address sea level rise, wildfires, the impacts of hurricane type weather will be significant, and this set aside from our real property tax program really provides seed money for initial planning and discussion with council and the public to ensure that we have a plan to go forward, and with that, estimates of costs that we can expect on a timetable. So with that, I'd like to take questions, if any, and then call on our Executive Director of our Office of Climate Change, Resiliency, and Sustainability, Ben Sullivan.
Okay,
thank you.
Members, any questions for Director Kawano? If there aren't any questions right now, I do have a question. So if we were to create a process by which members of the public could apply for grants, is the department able to create a portal? I mean, we went through this with the Transit Construction Mitigation Fund. How quickly could you set that up and begin to administer this?
My understanding is that our Corporation Council is still looking at the process of making grants. They're very positive about it, but they're going to come back to us with an opinion. You're right. The best way to do it would be to set up a portal so the public and organizations that are advocates of climate resiliency are able to self-service, if you will, go to the portal and apply for grants. We're not there yet. That's one of the programs that Ben Sullivan will discuss when you call him up, but we're seriously looking at that initiative.
Good. Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll welcome up the Executive Director of OCCSR.
Nope. Thank you, Chair Santos-Tam and members of the committee. It's my pleasure to be here today to be talking to you about this Climate Resiliency Fund. Obviously, we all recognize that the voters gave a clear message here that climate change is an urgent issue. There's obviously a lot of good work going on in the city already, but this is a message to say, let's accelerate that work, let's make it more visible, let's get more people involved, and let's make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and our future with regards to all the impacts we face. So if I may, we do have some specific comments on the bill, but if I may spend a few minutes just to talk about our general intent and direction with regards to where the fund may go and get your feedback and input on that, it would be invaluable for us to have a better understanding. So I think speaking of urgency, we all know that climate impacts are here today. They're impacting us. We all know that climate change must be talked about as two sides of a coin. We have to prepare for the inevitable impacts of climate change that we're already seeing. And then we have to find ways to mitigate our contribution, however small, to the overall problem of carbon pollution globally. That second question I want to just briefly deal with and say, we understand that the most important thing when we look at climate expenditures on Oahu is to understand the condition of many of the families on Oahu who are struggling to make ends meet. We have data from Alice, we have data from the food bank. All of it says people can't afford these extra expenses. And so the way to look at carbon reduction is one where we find those solutions that actually help people save money and at the same time reduce carbon in the atmosphere. And so with regards to that, that is a critical approach. This fund offers the opportunity for us to augment the many ongoing projects and to really seed some new ones, as Director Kawano said. Really briefly, climate change impacts, as we know, that are already hitting us include flooding, hurricanes, drought and wildfire, extreme heat, and sea level rise. The recently released Climate Ready Oahu, which this council passed by resolution back in February, does a good job of outlining at a strategic level the impacts that we face and many of the strategies that we can take to address those issues. At a high level, that strategy has three pillars that I want to again emphasize here today. They are empowered and prepared people, safeguarded and stewarded āina, and safe and reliable infrastructure. So really just a look at key recent and ongoing projects to give a sense and context to where we are and what we're doing. Within the office, we recently completed the long-term disaster recovery plan. We're working with DEM on the hazard mitigation plan update. We have been continuing to work with Kapiolani Community College on Resilience Hub network development, which is to say community groups that want to create their own resilience in their neighborhoods and want support and training and resources from the city and other partners to be organized and to be prepared as best they can. We have done considerable work around getting people flood ready. This includes anticipation of the FEMA flood insurance rate map updates that we updated you all on recently so that folks are both prepared for the potential for insurance costs, but also have means and measures to adapt and to make sure that their homes are as flood ready as is possible, as we know there will be increases in floods. We have a Climate Champions program that we are very proud of that really opens up the conversation and says, hey, the city doesn't have all the solutions and the community has many, and we need to be listeners as much as we are educators. So being educated and being partners with community is an essential part of all of this. We have our ongoing building benchmarking. We have a climate action plan update that speaks very much to what I originally mentioned about focusing our climate action efforts on saving money for communities. I want to just briefly touch on multi-agency efforts to scope our climate change response. As Director Kawano indicated, we are still at the beginning of understanding the scope of our full liabilities when it comes to climate change. There are many costs, many projects we don't understand. We believe that there is good progress being made in understanding these issues. Several projects that I think are very important that are ongoing that start to talk to these issues. Department of Planning and Permitting has a project, Adapt Waikiki 2050, that you are all likely somewhat familiar with. The University of Hawaii as a partner has a very good project called the Waikiki Resilience and Adaptation Project. There are the One Water Project and the Climate Financial Risk Assessment are just a couple others. I'm going to try to just get straight to what we see as how to spend within the Resiliency Fund. And there are several areas. So one is to integrate climate adaptation into all city planning. This is a very strong focus right now. We are already implementing the climate change design guidelines, and we anticipate the need for additional capital expenses to amend projects as they go through this process. So we're suggesting $1.5 billion this year to be able to assure that projects, as they hit these new criteria, aren't stopped because of a lack of funding. We are looking to prepare ourselves over the next 12 months for capital projects that will come out of the One Water Plan. So while we won't see those in this year's request, we do anticipate significant requests next year out of the One Water Plan. That One Water Plan is really a multi-agency plan that looks at multiple climate impacts across the island and identifies the most critical hotspots for infrastructure work that require multiple utilities to be doing planning at the same time. We, secondly, really want to emphasize the importance of community partnerships to build resilience. This goes to the comment about grants, and so we're very interested to hear the outcome of the potential for grants. I mentioned the Climate Champions Project. Indigenous solutions to climate change are critical. Dealing with invasive species as part of our climate solution is critical, and bringing community members and community groups in to help solve those problems is a key part of this. We also are working, although these have been stalled somewhat, with energy efficiency efforts around affordable housing. We anticipated for the last year and a half considerable funding coming in from the federal government that would bring relief to many households. That money is somewhat up in the air, but we anticipate that we're going to be able to see some of that and still bring some of the benefits to the community. I'll pause there. We'd be happy to grab questions. I also need a sip of water here, so excuse me for that.
Members, any questions for the Executive Director of OCCSR? Okay. Oh, Councilmember Weyer.
Mahalo. Appreciate that, Chair. Mahalo, Director. I just had a couple questions to kind of lay out the reasoning for the bill too. And so just based off what you know about cesspool conversion requirement or conversion, that is a state requirement. Is that your understanding?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so does the city have presently any liability or responsibility in terms of the private conversions, or would that be more of a DOH compliance and potentially EPA violation if there's some individual right of action?
I'm not aware of the liability that the city may have with regards to cesspool conversions, so I wouldn't comment on that.
Okay. And yeah, and I just wanted to clarify that because I think, I know it's important for us to all have skin in the game. And so don't want it to be framed as, the county's taking on all the responsibility for trying to do all the conversions, understanding our numbers are lower. And of course, say Big Island with 50,000, I don't think their county could fund all the conversions, but just appreciate the answers to those questions and just wanted to kind of throw that out as well, Chair. Mahalo.
Thank you. Very good questions. Anyone else for OCCSR? Okay. Seeing none, we have Director Designate Babcock.
Okay, good morning, Chair Dos Santos-Tam, Vice Chair Nishimoto, and council members Cordero, āina, Weyer, and Tupola. Good morning, Roger Babcock, Director Designate, Department of Environmental Services. I just would add to the question or the answer about cesspool conversions and be happy to answer any questions about that. So the department would support that. We do sewer improvement district projects. We have multiple projects like that identified where folks in the cesspool areas that have cesspools where we're planning to bring sewers to them. And it is possible that this kind of a grant could assist homeowners perhaps with their connections to sewers. So we would support that as, as a possibility, and it could be, beneficial for some of the ratepayers. And happy to answer any other questions about that.
Okay, members, any questions for the Director Designate? Sensing none from the members, I do have one question. With regard to the cesspools around the island, how would you have a way of prioritizing which ones we might want to tackle first, which ones maybe are a little bit more complicated? Do you have a sense of how that would go?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So the state has done a lot of effort on that prioritization. And since this is the Climate Resiliency Fund, presumably we would focus on those cesspools that are impacted by either sea level rise or groundwater inundation. So those would be mostly the coastal cesspools. And actually there are, unfortunately, quite a few of those. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
All right, members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn to testimony at this time. Clerks, is there anyone here in the chamber who'd like to testify or registered to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, and then is there anyone online, either registered or standing by?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion on this item. Councilmember āina.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to both the introducer and co-introducer of this measure. I fully support. I actually feel that it actually impacts individual families, and I think that's what makes it, exciting. With regard to all of the other proposals that were mentioned, I get it, but this is the wrong time. I believed Budget Director during the consideration of this bill, and that is when we are contemplating the budget, and I know that already happens, climate change is supposed to be built into it. So now that the public has spoken, I think that this was a good idea because number one, there's the need. And number two, it impacts local families, right? They need the help. So all of the other things that you guys are talking about, of course it's meritorious, but the council, should it get passed, will be sending a message that this is where we want it to be funded. Of course, I care deeply about invasive species. You guys know that. If there's any extra funds, I would like it. This is not just about the coconut rhinoceros beetle or little fire ants. If we don't stop the coqui frog, which is already jumping over to East Oahu, we're going to have them in East Oahu. And that is scandalous for the federal, state, and city governments to allow a small population of coqui frog at the base of Waimanalo, when we were told, oh, don't worry, we have it under control. And there are community groups going out there in the night to hand catch these coqui frogs. They've already jumped to the summit, so what are we waiting for? So quite frankly, I'm past, go get your funding for planning elsewhere. I'm tired of planning, okay? I'm tired of implementing. We need to address. And I believe that this bill does that. And so I think it's the right approach, and we need to move forward because things are only going to get worse, and we need to help our communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Members, further discussion. Councilmember Cordero.
I have a question, Chair.
Oh, yes.
Thank you very much. I have a question for Director Babcock relating to how, if we were to do this aggressively, how quick would we be able to see all the properties that need to have cesspool conversions be converted? What would that timeline look like?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So, Roger Babcock, Department of Environmental Services. So there's kind of different parts of the question. Currently, our programs are related to sewering certain neighborhoods where that is essentially feasible in the proximity of our existing treatment plants. Most of the cesspools are not in those areas and are in areas that we do not plan to bring sewers to. Much of the area in Councilmember Weyer's district, the North Shore, so the homeowners currently will kind of be on their own. But overall, the big picture, about 10,000 cesspools, private cesspools on the island still. For all those to change will probably take until 2050 when the deadline is. It's a long process. That's a lot of contractors, a lot of work, a lot of design and permits that have to happen. So it's I guess the answer is it's a long question, a long process, Council Member.
Thank you. Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. And mahalo for that feedback, Director. Could you maybe just dive into the numbers a little bit more? So I think out of that 10,000, there are plans to sewer, am I remembering correctly?
Correct. So currently, in our CIP program, about 3,000, a little over 3,000 are planned. It's not designed or necessarily and all funded yet, but they have been identified in facility plans as essentially within the catchment areas of existing treatment plants.
Okay, appreciate that. So then if we're, anticipating sewering 3,000, that leaves 7,000. And then of course, as currently structured, the bill would be income restricted for conversion or hook up to the sewer for folks that had those projects. So it wouldn't necessarily be initially created to provide cesspools for conversion for everybody, right? Is that your understanding?
Yeah, correct. I think the way I read it is it's just one possible thing that could be done with a portion of the funds, and so we would, not be in opposition to that. It does seem like a relevant thing to perhaps use some of the funds for.
Okay. Mahalo. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Yep. Thank you, members. Any other questions? All right. Yeah, Councilmember Tupola.
Aloha, Director. So in the 3,000, is that including the EVA district that we spoke about that you guys would be doing? It's a little under 1,000 homes?
Yes, Councilmember, that's correct. It does include those. That's okay. 979 to be exact.
Oh, okay. Thank you so much. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. Any other questions? Okay, back to discussion. Any further discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, the chair recommends that Bill 15 of 2025 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2025-0134/2/19/2025 7:44 a.m. Any discussion, objections, or reservations to amending to a CD1? Okay, there being no objections, so ordered. It's been amended to a CD1. The chair then recommends that Bill 15, 2025 CD1 be reported out for second reading and scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion, objections, or reservations to the recommendation to report out for second reading and scheduling of a public hearing? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, members. This brings us to agenda item number 5, and we're making good progress, everyone. This is Bill 16, 2025, addressing the collection of refuse and recyclable materials. Members, we do have a proposed hand-carried CD1 submitted by Councilmember Weyer. Councilmember Weyer, if you'd like to discuss your hand-carried CD1.
I'll just defer to, let me pull it up real quick. Yeah, I don't think we were gonna put forward the hand carry today.
Okay, great.
Appreciate that.
Okay, in that case, we have with us Director-Designate Babcock.
Okay, good morning again. Chair dos Santos-Tam, Vice Chair Nishimoto, and council members, Roger Babcock, Director-Designate, Department of Environmental Services. So Bill 16 seeks to add additional collection of refuse in the weeks following Christmas and New Year's. The Department of Administration is opposed to this ordinance, this bill as proposed, and the reason for that is the need for this additional collection is not known at this time. We don't have any data that suggests that these additional collections are needed. They would want to know which specific collections. We have 3 different types of collection services that we provide. We have the sidearm, side loader for individual residences that have the 3 carts, the gray, green, and blue carts that are collected, the gray cart once per week, and then either the blue or the gray once a week as well. We have manual collection services, which is the rear loader trucks, and those do twice-a-week collections, and everything is grouped together. Refuse is all lumped together in recyclables, and those are not recycled in the manual service. And then the same thing is true with the front loader service, which is also provided twice per week to some multifamily residents, stuff like that. And again, that's a combined service, so they're already getting twice per week, every week, including during the holidays. I would point out that we do collect refuse 363 days per year. There are 2 days per year that we don't collect. That is Christmas and New Year's. And so we are not sure about the need for this. And it's not clear which types of service, that it would apply to. I know that there is during the holidays, there are challenges for folks whose regular collection day does fall on one of those 2 holidays. For those folks, if it is a gray cart day, then the instruction is, as always, to leave the cart out and it will be collected hopefully the next day, but sometimes it does take us 2 or 3 days to catch up during those 2 weeks. But folks, generally, we appreciate, their patience, and it is good for our folks to have at least, to have the 2 days off per year. But anyway, I'd be happy to, answer any questions. Thank you.
Yeah, members, any questions? Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. And understanding that, there's other bills probably that will be discussed just regarding the rubbish pickup and everything. So I'm sure this will be evaluated further. So I guess today my question would just be if there's any suggestions you have or ideas, because I think this stems from folks being concerned that rubbish piles up around the holiday season and sometimes is in excess of what can go into the gray bin. And I know we've talked to the community that sometimes, folks don't necessarily want to leave the rubbish laying around. And then we also see, I don't necessarily know if it's limited to the holiday season, but even during other times of the year, contamination from folks just once their bin is full, maybe they jump to another bin and throw stuff into one it's not supposed to be in. And so and given all of that, I just wonder if there's any further insight or advice or suggestions or ideas that you could provide. Mahalo.
Yeah, thank you, Councilmember, for that question. As you know, we collect from about 200,000 separate customers every week, twice. And it is and you've heard about some of the challenges we've had with equipment. And the good news is we're catching up with equipment. There still are some routes left occasionally, but we're getting better. And we have received some equipment this year and receiving a whole bunch of equipment again next year. Collecting all the refuse every day from so many residents involving so many city staff is very challenging. And during the holiday season, there is more refuse. And so we see that at in our collections, in our volumes, in our weights, and at our transfer stations and at H-Power. And so we try to keep everything up and running and have everything, going well during that time of the year. And so we, in general, the public is super cooperative, of course, and they'll hold rubbish and for the next collection, or they could take it to a transfer station or a convenience center, which are open all the time, 7 days a week, 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. So folks always have that option, as well as to bring recyclables there. And so we, of course, like you, Councilmember, we really encourage people to recycle and to use all of the, available, the resources and options that we have for that. And that includes, of course, bulky items, white goods, recyclables, and many other things. We're just starting an e-waste. Now you can drop e-waste at all the convenience centers. I believe that's starting this week, and we've been working on that contract for a long time. So I guess those would be my suggestions. I hope that's partially at least answers your question.
Thank you, it does. And maybe just last question. Could you walk us through the process for folks that want to get an additional bin? Because I think that would require an assessment over the period of time, right? And then wouldn't just be specific to the holidays, but would be based on their overall production of rubbish?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So the standard issue for single-family residents is the 3 carts, 1 each of gray, green, and blue. Folks with larger properties, and I believe is it 10,000 square feet, larger than 10,000 square feet, are eligible to get a second green cart. I don't even think they have to do any evaluation, right? Yeah, so they just have to request it, so that's a second green cart, that's possible. Folks can qualify through an assessment process to get an additional gray card, and I think blue card as well. And so that is a several-month process where you do a request, and then you need to demonstrate. So we have inspectors who will come out early in the morning before collection on collection days, and they would want to see a full gray cart and then bagged refuse in addition to that piled next to it. And if they meet the requirements over a few month period where there's consistently extra trash, and they will also inspect to make sure they're not putting recyclables in there, then they qualify for a second cart. And just so you know, we also do have a maximum, and the maximum is that any residents would have no more than 5 carts total. So you can't get an extra green, an extra blue, and an extra gray. You could only get 2 extra, essentially. And so that, hopefully that explains the process. Thanks.
It does. Thank you. Mahalo, Chair.
Okay, Councilmember āina.
To follow up on those line of questions, because I get it a lot, what if they don't meet the threshold for the acreage and everything? And what if, why don't you allow people to buy the extra bin? What if they bought the bin? Is that okay?
Thank you for that question. Yes. You know, I have to check on the green cart. You can get one by request automatically if your yard is a certain size.
Yes,
but
I
I'm
know
not
that.
positive whether you can get an extra one any other way, a green cart. I'm sorry, I'm looking back at
So
my deputy director.
I'm offering a proposal.
Yeah.
Because I have a lot of constituents who get rejected.
Yeah, so it's an excellent proposal, and we'd be happy to look into that because I think we're certainly geared up to be able to collect the extra carts. Currently, the city owns all the carts, right? So it remains the city property, and I think we would want to keep it that way, except for manual routes. Then folks have their own, their own receptacles. But yeah, we definitely will
So I'm
look into
proposing that, right? And what you do is this, you just, can you give me a cost estimate? So let me tell you how you solve that. You just put, smack on a logo or something, and then you're gonna know which is the city and which is the homeowners, and that's theirs to keep. But there are countless people out there who would like to dispose of various waste, especially green waste. And of course, green waste, the disposal of that is critically important because that is how our coconut rhinoceros beetle are multiplying and inhabiting the Hawaiian Islands because of green waste. So we want the green waste outside of people's homes gone.
Yeah, yeah. No, it's a great suggestion. I do know that we buy a lot of carts, and they're about $100 and something a piece right now, but we're buying thousands at a time. But we could presumably sell them. It's not clear that we would do that. That we might just have them because they're all stamped, pre-stamped with City and County of Honolulu property, and it is important that they are sized properly and exactly so that we can lift them effectively. But you're right, the coconut rhinoceros beetle is a big concern. Whenever our composting contractor is very much aware of that, they're heavily inspected and stuff by Department of Agriculture, and whenever they get coconut rhinoceros beetle, they immediately, and they know that they have it, they immediately grind it and process it first before anything else, whereas other waste tends to take time to be processed. So I think, I'm pretty sure that the spread is not associated with our sort of refuse, green waste collection and processing services that we provide. We immediately take everything. We don't store any waste. Yeah.
I agree with you. The problem is when the green waste are being stored on people's lots.
People's lots, yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
and
that's
not healthy for communities.
Yep, I agree.
You.
Thank you.
Okay, members, other questions?
Chair.
Yeah, Councilmember Tupola.
Yeah, Director Babcock, I don't have a question, but I just wanted to reiterate that I do support what Councilmember āina just brought up. And for a separate bill at a different time, I'll speak with you about it. But I think if that is a possibility that people can purchase bins, I know that would help, on our cost side. And so I appreciate you being open to that idea and getting back to us on that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Members, any other questions? Okay, if not, well, just one last question. So just to reiterate, the proposed additional service here, the department hasn't evaluated the proposed cost of doing this.
Yes, we have. So the additional cost is for the 2 additional services. So it would be done on overtime, so it's a little more costly than a regular collection, but we estimate $375,000 to provide 2 additional complete routes. We assumed that was just gray, which would be the issue, as opposed to other things. So we do have a cost number, but feasibility and scheduling is a different issue because of the delayed collections that already happened because of the day that the holidays fall on. So there's multiple routes, and in order to have it be effective, you'd need to schedule it, to rigidly schedule, so people would know the additional day. And so that would be quite challenging, just the logistics. And the other issue would be that it would, of course, be on overtime, and as you probably know, all overtime is optional, so we can't force folks to take overtime, even to do a mandated collection.
And then has this proposal or something similar ever been discussed with UPW and the other relevant unions?
No, I don't believe this has been discussed before, no.
Okay. Members, Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. And I just had a few follow-up questions. I'll know we did talk to UPW and they were open to it, so we didn't see any objections from them. But I actually like the idea of what's been thrown out by Councilmember āina, Councilmember Tupola. And I'm curious, has there been because it sounds like you're saying we would have capacity to maybe charge folks for an extra bin and pick that up during normal routes? Is that kind of what I was hearing earlier?
Yes, so because we have the program where folks can get an extra green cart, in general, yes, we have capacity. That would mean that, it's on regular routes, there's a green cart already, there's an extra green cart. I think if every single resident wanted an extra green cart, that could be a problem. But we assume that, that wouldn't be the case. I actually don't have a number for how many folks have an extra green cart, but it would be thousands, I'm pretty sure. But I don't know the exact number, but I'm pretty sure we can handle extra capacity, because the way it works is routes have a certain number of carts on the route, and the driver needs to finish the route however many times they have to go to the HER and back and forth. So I believe it could be done.
Okay. Is there, and last question, Chair, I'm just curious if there's easily pullable or accessible data to know kind of what our capacity would be to add additional carts while still being within current times, pickups, contract requirements, because that would be, I think, a great potential revenue generation while also meeting the needs of the community. But yeah, I was just curious.
Yeah, thank you. We have discussed informally, but not made a proposal for potentially charging, not for the cart itself, but for the extra service. But that so far hasn't gotten anywhere. So far, we don't have the ability to charge residential customers for any part of the service.
Okay, mahalo, Chair.
Thanks.
Okay, members, any final questions here? Okay, there being none, we'll now proceed with in-person testifiers. Is there anyone here in the chamber who's either registered or would like to speak on this item? And then clerks, do we have anyone standing by remotely or registered remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being no public testimony, members, we are in discussion on this. I think we've had a fairly robust discussion here. But is there anything else anyone would like to add? Okay, seeing none, I think at this time we, give me 1 second. Okay, so at this time, I think because of some issues that The Director Designate discussed budget impact, feasibility, and other items. I think at this time, my recommendation will be to postpone Bill 16 of 2025 to a date and time to be determined by the chair until such a time that we can get a little bit more information on it. Is there any further discussion, objections, or reservations to that recommendation? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. All right, members, Bill 17. This is item number 6 on the agenda, amending provisions relating to the real property tax home exemption. Members, we do have a posted proposed CD1 submitted by Councilmember āina. For your information, those amendments are listed on the agenda. Councilmember āina, would you like to say anything about your proposed CD1 or the underlying bill?
Sure. Thank you so much, Chair. Members, as you recall, Bill 40, 2022 had increased the home exemption for all property owners from $100,000 to $120,000, and for 65 years and older from $140,000 to $160,000. This exemption went into effect in 2024, and I know that at the time of consideration, there are a lot of taxpayers who believe that it should have been increased even further, and we took a conscious decision to make sure that we realize the fiscal impact. From my point of view, the impact should be every few years. 3 years for me is an adequate amount of time. My amendment, instead of making it fiscal year 2027, which should have been applied in 2026, I have modified it. So my CD1 would make the effective date July 1st, 2027. And what it does is it modifies that 2022, Bill 44, 2022, and it increases it from $120,000 to $140,000 for all taxpayers, and for those 65 and older, from $160,000 to $180,000. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, at this time, we have the Director of Budget and Fiscal Services, Andy Kawano.
Thank you again, Budget Chair Dos Santos-Tam, for allowing BFS and the administration to share our thoughts. Honorable Council members, Andy Kawano, Director of Budget and Fiscal Services. Yeah, we understand the introduction of Bill 17. I recall actually testifying that, with regard to changes in exemption amounts, we can have open discussion with council, listen to the public, and do reevaluations periodically, as Councilmember āina just mentioned. So I'm in alignment with that. My concern is there's a lot of bills that we still have active, and we should look at all of these real property tax bills in unison and together make decisions on which ones we're going to move with and which ones not. So my only suggestion is that going forward, since Councilmember āina has moved the effective date back, that we seriously consider establishing a permitted interaction group to discuss Bill 17, 2025, and all of the other active real property tax bills that we have still up for consideration. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions for the Director of BFS? Okay, seeing none, thank you. We'll move on to public testimony at this time. Clerks, do we have anyone registered or standing by here in the chambers?
Chair, there are none.
And then clerks, is there anyone standing by remotely or registered remotely?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion on this item. Councilmember āina.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Director Kawano, for your mana'o on the permanent interaction group, which is something that I support. I do know that we have later on in the agenda an item relating to a type of RPT, permitted interaction group, and so I will pine then. I still believe, however, that barring the establishment of that for bills that we can all collectively agree on, I think that nothing is wrong with moving it forward. I am aware that we should endeavor to find revenue generating bills, and We do have several of that in the hopper, and I'm looking forward to that discussion. But for today's purposes, I would encourage my colleagues to move this bill forward. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Members,
Chair.
further, Councilmember Cordero.
Chair, I agree with Councilmember Āina, and I do believe that, with discussions of a pig, and I think I'm going to take the words from our Council Vice Chair Weyer, where he said that it's the will of the Council to establish a PIG, a permanent interaction group. So we understand the request from the administration, but we would like to have any certain requests come from the Council themselves. Mahalo.
Okay. Thank you. Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I would be supportive of the measure generally, and appreciate Councilmember Āina leading on this effort. I know we've all at times had different degrees of increasing the homeowner occupant exemption, and my support largely just stems from the fact that I don't think the exemption is kept up with the increase in valuations or the values of properties. With that said, I do think my preference is still to continue to evaluate the low-income tax credit. Of course, as I said, supportive of this measure, but in terms of broader city financial impact and also the relief that it provides, right, if we're capping RPT for a household at 3% of their income, right, then, and have a threshold for who that applies to, I think we've talked about increasing it maybe to $100,000, which is commensurate with what's around low and moderate income based on the HUD numbers. Someone that is making upwards of that, but in a cheaper, like a condo, probably wouldn't, would probably still pay their full property tax bill because it'd probably be under their cap. But if you're looking towards kupuna, maybe finding themselves on limited income, but in the much more expensive homes now that have increased in value, I think it would better target those that actually have a financial hardship while not lumping in folks that maybe are able to afford the RPT on their, coastal home or a home that's not a generational home. And so just wanted to lay that out for why I lean towards the evaluation of the low-income tax credit, but I'm supportive of responding to the needs of our community.
Okay. Councilmember Āina.
Thank you, Councilmember Weyer. I actually support that effort. I would have introduced that in tandem, but I saw that it was already introduced by yourself and Councilmember Cordero, so I think we are all in sync and realize that both the tax credit and exemption should probably be considered simultaneously as moving toward the council. So I welcome continuing dialogue on that front.
Okay. Members, any other comments on this? Okay. Seeing none, it sounds like there's a lot that we need to do, and I appreciate all the members' interest in the various real property tax measures we need to put forward. I'm sure there will be others that are yet to come forward to make things more fair and more sensible for our tax-paying public. I appreciate that the CD1 pushes the date out to July 1st of 2027, and I do see this underlying bill as a vehicle for taking some action on things that we need to do. We've known that we've needed to do this for quite some time. And so at this time, the chair is recommending that Bill 17 of 2025 be amended to the posted CD1 identified as OCS 2025-0153/2/24/2025 4:12 p.m. Any discussion, objections, or reservations to the recommendation to amend? Okay, there being none, the bill has been amended to a CD1. The chair then recommends that Bill 17 of 2025 CD1 be reported out for second reading and the scheduling of a public hearing. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. This will come back, of course, to committee at some point, and by then we'll probably have some other measures, including potentially creating a PIG and other items that would, again, make our property tax system a little bit more fair for everyone. Now, part and parcel to the proposal to address the increasing property valuations, and other fees that burden our taxpayers. This brings us to Bill 60, which would amend portions of Chapter 43 ROH 2021 as amended by first, amending Section 43-6.2 to include accessory dwelling units in the residential sewer service charge customer classification. Secondly, amending Section 43-6.6 to remove all information related to non-residential strength surcharges and replace it with information on wastewater disposal charges for waste haulers. Thirdly, amending Appendix 43-A to include new sewer service charges, wastewater disposal charges, and to remove extra strength wastewater charges, as well as a second customer category. Fourthly, amending Section 43-10.3 to include accessory dwelling units. Fifthly, amending Section 43-10.4 to remove references to wastewater strength. And sixthly, amending Appendix 43-C to include new wastewater system facility charges. This item is only for discussion on today's agenda, so we have the chance to ask more questions about this very important topic. Members, we do, for your information though, have a proposed CD1 submitted by Councilmember Tupola, and for your information, those amendments are listed on the agenda. Councilmember Tupola, do you want to mention what your proposed CD1 does?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, could we come back to me on that? Let me
Of
just
course.
review it. Thank you.
All right, we'll turn it over to the Director Designate of the Department of Environmental Services, Roger Babcock, who I understand has a presentation. Okay, it appears it's on the screen here. Is it working? Okay, and for the public following along at home, it's Departmental Communication 154. All right,
Okay.
ready to go?
Yeah, ready to go. So good morning again. Roger Babcock, Director Designate, Department of Environmental Services. So I do have a presentation, and then be happy to answer questions before, during, or after. Council members also received yesterday, end of day, a detailed response, a 17-page response to a series of questions that were asked about Bill 60, as well as a copy of our final draft sewer rate study, which is what was part of the process of coming forward with Bill 60, requesting the proposed sewer fee increases. So I'll go ahead and go through the presentation. So first we'll do an overview. So as you know, environmental services, in addition to taking care of refuse, we also take care of wastewater. And what that involves, just really briefly, is about 750,000 population is served, 2,100 miles of sewer pipes, 71 wastewater pump stations, and 9 wastewater treatment plants, treating about 100 million gallons of wastewater every day. That's the average. When it rains, it's a lot more than that. And about 149,000 individual sewer accounts that are paying fees. That does include about 140,000 residential and about 9,000 commercial and industrial. Just a really brief slide of some of the things that we are, challenges that we're currently working on. We have new regulations, including things that you've heard of like PFAS and microplastics. We are finishing the consent decree from 2010. We have dealing with climate change and sea level rise impacting a lot of our infrastructure. We do have aging infrastructure as well. As you know, citywide, we have a workforce shortage, but we are making good progress on that. And as was mentioned earlier today, there are cesspool conversions. In our case, that's mostly sewering projects. So to review very briefly the current residential and non-residential sewer fees. Sewer fees currently consist of a base charge and a volumetric charge. The current base charge per single-family residence is $77.55 per month. There is a volumetric charge of $4.63 per 1,000 gallons. The per 1,000 gallons is calculated based upon the amount of water that's metered from the Board of Water Supply each month, minus 20%, which is assumed for used for outdoor irrigation, meaning that we assume 80% of the water that is purchased from Board of Water Supply becomes sewage. There are some folks, especially in Laie, who do not have water from Board of Water Supply, so we do not have meter data, so we cannot charge them the volumetric charge. So they pay a fixed monthly charge, which assumes an average amount of water use, and it's $110.89. Those are for single-family residential. Multifamily residential is similar. The volumetric charge is the same. However, the base charge is slightly smaller at $53.32 per month per unit. So that is the residential rates. Those have been in place since July 1st of 2016. This shows the non-residential rates, which are exactly the same, essentially. The base charge is $77.55. The volumetric charge is $4.63. The difference is that these are not single-family residents, and so what's done is a calculation is done is the equivalent number of single-family homes are represented by the business or the hotel or the industry. And then they are charged $77.55 per month times the number of equivalent units. And they pay the same volumetric charge. Okay, the next slide shows the rate increase history from 1999, these are fiscal years, 1999 up through the present and out into the future with what is proposed. So you'll notice that there are some periods there where there were no increases in fees. There were some very large increases from 2006 through 2011. Some of these are 25% per year, and several are close to 20%. Then there were some moderate increases from 2012 through 2017 of 4 to 8%, and then we've had no increases for over 8 years. And then what we've proposed is shown there, and it is extended out even further than what we have proposed, but we have data out through 2040 with all of our planning. And the message there is that when you don't increase fees for a long period of time, then you need larger increases than if you had just raised them as moderate amounts over time, with consistency. Okay, so I'm going to go over the rate study now. So this is the kind of a little slide that shows what the rate study looks like. It consists of an executive summary, an introduction that explains the procedure, the projected revenues under previously approved rates. That's the current rates, how much projected revenue we would receive if we did not raise the rates. Then there's a calculation of the revenue requirement based on operation and maintenance and other things, and capital improvement programs, debt service. Then there's the rate setting approach and the rate structure alternatives. There's a big section on public outreach. Then there is the proposed sewer rate adjustments that have been transmitted in Bill 60. And then there are some appendices which show the rate schedule, example bills, and discuss our advisory group that worked with us on this process. Okay, so the next slide shows the process that you go through to establish rates. There are 4 steps shown here. The first thing to do is to estimate the projected revenues under current rates without raising the rates. The second step is to estimate the revenue requirements, and this takes a few different things have to happen. So we have to determine the operation and maintenance costs into the future. So we use the current operation and maintenance costs, the approved budget for FY25, and then we escalate that assuming inflation. The inflation rates that are assumed there are that we've used are shown. FY26, that's the current upcoming year, 4%, 27, 3.5%, and then all future years we use 3%. So that's how we get the operation and maintenance expense requirements for the future. The next part is important, and that's debt service. So we do issue sewer revenue bonds, tax-free municipal bonds, every year to fund our capital improvement program. And so that's our construction projects. And so we have to estimate our debt service needs, expenses that we will have going into the future. So we base that on our CIP plan, the 6-year CIP plan you folks are aware of, and then it extends well beyond that. In this case, through 2040, but the rate setting period is through 2035. So we have to use financial models, make assumptions about how much interest we'll pay and the repayment schedule based on what we know and what we have now to estimate the debt service for now out through the next 10 to 15 years. The final thing is to put in a reserve fund. We have to have a reserve fund that's required for our bond covenant requirements. The next step, step 3, is to determine the annual rate increases that would meet the revenue requirements determined in step 2, and to evaluate various rate structure alternatives. In other words, how much percentage per year to increase. And then step 4 is we work with our stakeholder advisory group, looking through all of this information and having them help us develop a recommended fee increase schedule for FY26 through FY35. Okay, so the next few slides kind of go through those steps and show some numbers. So for step 1, that's looking at our revenue without increasing the fees. So this shows the top, the table lists the fiscal year at the top. So that's FY 2026, 27, et cetera, out through 2035. It also has a total. So that first row at the top, or the second row, I guess, shows the total annual revenue without a rate increase. So that's keeping the $77.55 and the $4.63 per 1,000 gallons. And this is how the revenue would be projected into the future. The next line below that shows the existing obligations without any new debt being issued. So this is the requirements to do operation and maintenance as projected, as well as the existing debt service of our existing debt, our debt payments that are required out into the future without issuing any new debt at all. So it's kind of an end member, not what we intend to do. But you can see the totals that actually the numbers are very similar. So without rating increases, if we did not do any more construction projects, we could just barely meet the obligations. The next figure shows the part of step 2. Essentially, a big part of step 2 is to show the estimates of the operation and maintenance costs estimates out into the future. That's the green part of the bars. The reserves are the small little blue pieces under there. And then the red is the debt service. So you see that currently we're in FY25. The total is about $450 million, and about half is operation and maintenance, and about half is debt service. As we go through, we do have planned capital improvement program, and so we will be issuing more debt as we move through the years to build various construction projects that are required. Okay, so the next slide shows a little bit more about step 2, the various components that I showed you. Operation and maintenance, that's the one that's escalated according to inflation. And so you can see the row across there with $231 million next year and $237.7 million in 27, et cetera, moving out. The existing debt service is shown as its own line, its own row there, $179 million in FY26, escalating over time, or not really escalating over time because you're paying off debt, so it goes up and down a little bit based on different debt that's been issued in the past, different bonds that are paid off over 30 years. And you can see those totals there. Then the next row is the anticipated new debt service. So this is not the cost of doing the construction projects, but it's the cost of the money that we borrow. Essentially, we issue bonds, we get the money, and then we start paying it off over time. And it does take 30 years, essentially, to pay off debt that we incur each year. So you see the numbers are start off small, and then they tend to increase, over time, additional debt service. And you'll see that the debt service is essentially doubling from the existing debt service to future as you look out further into towards the end of the 10 years. Actually, it surpasses it in 2033, and then in 34 and 35, the new debt service is larger than the existing debt service. Also, it shows the reserve contributions is the next row, which are relatively small numbers. And then the next one says total expenses prior to cash-funded capital. So that's a summation of the rows above. So those are the total expenses of the program of debt service and operation and maintenance, but not construction costs. Because the next row, cash-funded capital, that shows the cash money that we spend from our cash fund, which is all from sewer fees, to pay for part of the capital program. So part of the capital program is paid with debt, and part of it is paid with cash. And so the cash amount is shown there. And then the very bottom, the line shows the total annual expenditures over the 10-year period, including operation and maintenance, reserves, debt service, and cash-funded projects. Okay, the next slide is a more graphical representation of our capital improvement program by different types. For the period of 2025, the current fiscal year, through 2040, the 15-year period, the total capital program is $10.1 billion. But we don't spend $10.1 billion. We borrow quite a bit of that money and fund it over 30 years. But as we saw on the previous slide, we do spend fund part of the capital program with cash. This shows the different types of projects that we do that make up the capital program, including trunk sewers, gravity sewer rehabilitation, replacement and maintenance, pump stations and force mains, treatment plants, and program management as well, including equipment. The orange part shows the consent decree. So that's from 2010, and I will say a little bit more about that in a moment, but that is to finish up the 2010 consent decree, which needs to be completed by 2035. And the orange is showing the appropriation, because they plan to award the project in 2028. And so we have to appropriate the money at that time. Okay, the next slide does show a little bit more about the consent decree. Just as a reminder, something that the city entered into on December 17th of 2010. It is with the US EPA, the Department of Health, the Sierra Club, the Hawaii's Thousand Friends, and our Children's Earth Foundation. It exists in federal court settlement. There are 3 phases. Just to summarize, the first phase was the collection system. That's all completed. There was a 10-year time frame to complete that, starting in 2010 through 2020. The second phase was to upgrade our wastewater treatment plant in Eva Beach, the Honolulu treatment plant, to full secondary. That needed to be done by last year in 2024, and that was completed on time as well and on budget. So we've met every milestone that has been placed in the consent decree. And the last phase is to finish phase 3, which is the Sand Island wastewater treatment plant upgrade. That is broken up into 2 phases. The first phase is under construction now. That's a 20 million gallon per day secondary upgrade. And then phase 2 is to add an additional 70 million gallons per day of capacity for a total capacity of 90 million gallons a day. That's what we call a maximum month flow. That's not the maximum flow that the plant can treat. It can treat 250 million gallons a day when it's raining. We also have doing a lot of stuff to do sustainability and also electricity generation and greenhouse gas emission reduction as part of that project. The Phase 1 upgrades is already under construction. It's been awarded, and it's about 60% complete. Phase 2 must be completed by December 31st of 2035. It's currently in final design. The approximate cost of both of those together is $2.5 billion. So moving on then to step 3 of the rate study, I have 2 tables here. And the first table shows the fiscal years across the top, and it shows the proposed rate increase percentages that we've proposed in Bill 60. It also shows the additional revenue that would be generated in each of those years by these percent increases. So for that fiscal year, how much additional money is generated compared to today for those years. And you do see a total at the end. So 115% increase has been proposed. That generates an extra $2.8 billion over those 10-year period, and it also shows the total annual revenue. So that's the sum of the additional revenue plus the existing revenue if we didn't raise rates. The table below, the lower table, does show other percent annual increase patterns that were evaluated. So there are multiple ways to generate the money needed to meet the revenue requirements. And so this table does show some other options that were considered. And so what you see is that when you do rates as part of step 3, you look at various options and you try and figure out a way that gives a smooth pattern that will not have rate shock and be easier for folks to plan for, as opposed to having smaller increases and then having large spikes in the future, which would be more challenging for folks to deal with. So you can see that we've done there are some different options there, and essentially in the end we wanted to choose an option which would avoid rate shock, which we kind of defined as being less than 10%. So single-digit rate increases were what our goal was. And I wanted to point out that it is not a happenstance that goes to 2035 that is related to finishing the 2010 consent decree. So at that point then, as was shown in one of the earlier slides, the rate increases become very small, more like inflation, just accounting for inflation once we get through this big project. Okay, the last thing to talk about is step 4, which is the public outreach and our stakeholder advisory group. We had this advisory group. As you can see, it met 6 times, and you can see the topics that they went through and assisting with all aspects of the rate study as we were completing it and working on it. And they had lots of input and feedback on the rates that we've proposed and the structure that we proposed in Bill 60.
And Director, before you move on, I just want to announce that Councilmember Cordero had to leave the meeting, so that's just for HRS compliance purposes.
Yeah, thanks, Councilmember. Thanks for bearing with me. The next thing is showing, is also part of step 4. So the 10-year rate package that we proposed is shown. It shows the percent per year as well as the cumulative. And it does point out, the other thing that's on there is it shows the inflation. As I mentioned, there's the 4% and then 3.5% and then 3% each year after that. And you know, that adds up to that cumulative amount there. So you can kind of see that inflation is an important part of the rate study. There are 2 other things to discuss real quickly that came out of the stakeholder advisory group, and that was to adjust the rate structure to improve equity and encourage conservation. And currently, as I'll explain, the rate structure is about 70% fixed fee and about 30% variable fee. And so we looked at changing that to 60-40 or 50-50 or even 100% zero and et cetera like that. And the advisory group had a lot of input on that. We also discussed with them extensively putting in a customer assistance program, and I'll describe that here in a second. So the teeter-totter here shows volumetric charge on the left going from 0 to 100%, and fixed charge on the right going from 0 to 100%. And the way it's balanced right now, it shows that about 75% or so of the total bill each month is currently based on the fixed charge, and a much smaller percent is based on the volumetric charge. So this allows very little control over folks' bills, as well as doesn't really incentivize water conservation very much. So several alternatives were evaluated. The one that was recommended by the Stakeholder Advisory Group and the department is more of a 50-50 balance. It gives folks greater control over the bill by reducing essentially the portion of the bill that's fixed, which you have no control over, and increasing the portion of the bill that's volumetric. So you adjust the rates so that you generate the same amount of income. So you have to make the volumetric rate larger and the fixed rate essentially smaller or hold it steady. And what that does is it incentivizes people to be able to use less water in order to have greater control over their bill. So the recommendations then for this step of it were that, so we also have this customer assistance program. So this was modeled after the very successful rental and utility relief program. We're proposing to fund it with $10 million per year initially. It would be income-based qualification, most likely 80% of the area median income. And this would be administered through a third-party nonprofit. And eligible customers would qualify for a $20 to $25 per month credit on their fixed charge. And you would need to apply for that, kind of like the RURP, and also have to re-up to remain enrolled in the program to maintain qualification. So the final slide on the rate study is the advisory group feedback and recommendations. So they wanted, of course, an important part is to ensure the minimum operating expenses can be met. They did not recommend going to an entirely fixed charge, which does not incentivize water conservation. Instead, to move to a 50-50 type configuration. Wanted to give customers more control over their bill. That's manifests in terms of the 50-50 bill proportions. They also want to support water conservation. In other words, folks who continue to use excessive amounts of water will pay a lot more, and people who use less water will pay less. They want to avoid rate shock, and that was to keep the all increases under 10%, and also to move to the 50-50 change, but over a 4-year period, so it doesn't happen immediately, and people's rates don't change as dramatically immediately. They also think that public education is very important, and they were highly recommended the customer assistance program for our lower income customers who would be most impacted by the sewer fee increases.
Okay, and Director Designate, before we go on to the
Yes.
Sample bills, I want to announce that Councilmember Cordero is back. I also wanted to just interject and turn it over to Councilmember Tupola, who has to leave, but since she had the proposed draft, I wanted to give her the opportunity to introduce that before she left.
Okay, thank you so much, Chair. Appreciate it. Thank you, Director Designate. So back when this was in PITS, we did do the CD because the Bill 60 originally removed all the fees before July 1, 2026, except for wastewater charges, which had set rates for 2025. But the bill was set to take effect on July 1, 2025, meaning that many fees would be removed for a year. So to fix the bill, we either needed to set new rates for 2025 or delay the start date by 2026. But seeing as though it's just a listening session today, hopefully we can go back and forth on what that needs to be fixed to, because the original bill wasn't written correctly. Secondly, I did file a council communication for everyone. I believe my chief of staff passed it out. It's Council Communication 51, and it has a integrated planning for clean water on Oahu, which will be spoken of in one of the testimonies by Emma from DOFA. And it specifically talks about that secondary treatment would actually emit double the carbon emissions if we do it that way. And there is an integrated planning alternative. And so she talks about it in there. So if everyone could kind of read through that, I thank Councilmember āina for directing me to her. And lastly, for Councilmember Weyer, it does talk specifically about how our integrated planning, if we include cesspool conversions, could actually suffice some of the consent decree and the settlement, because many other people had settlements with the EPA about what they needed to do to, better clean the water. So lastly, I'll wrap up, Chair. Lastly, I just wanted to iterate that Emma Ewan from DOFA actually has talked to many of the stakeholders, the Sierra Club, Nature Conservancy, Ko'olau Mountain Watershed, Oahu Waterkeepers, Department of Environmental Services, DFM. I mean, so many different stakeholders that are really in favor of this integrated planning approach that could significantly bring down the cost of everything being proposed. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you so much, Chair. Thank you, Director Designate.
Okay, thank you. All right, and by the way, for the remainder of the presentation, I'd like to turn over the gavel to Vice Chair Nishimoto, if he's willing, just for the remainder of the next few slides. Thanks. All right, Director, please proceed.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so the next thing to go over is the proposed rates. We don't have too many slides left. Okay, so this colorful table does show sample bills. So, what does the 9% per year mean in terms of the actual rates? And then we'll look at sample bills. So I talked about how we were going to move from 70-30 to 50-50 fixed volumetric proportions of the bill. So there are three sort of sets of rows of numbers: single-family residential at the top, multifamily residential in the middle, and then non-residential or commercial at the bottom. What you see across the top is which category it is, the rate structure, the monthly rate, whether it's fixed or volumetric, and then current, which is 2024. These are now based on years, not fiscal years, so kind of like actual years. So what we're currently paying is $77.55 and $4.63 per 1,000 gallons, for example, for single family. What it shows across the top row is how the base charge would increase over the 10-year period that we've proposed. So for July 1st of this year, it goes up to $77.83. And then you see it stays pretty similar or goes down just a little bit over the first 4 years. Then it starts to increase over the out years. And that's because we're switching to the 50-50. So the base charge essentially becomes a smaller proportion of the bill than it currently is. So, and then proportionally then, the volumetric charge increases more. So it's $4.63 now. It goes up to $6.14, $7.89, et cetera, over time. So you'll notice that the volumetric charge for all three categories, the second row, the fourth row, and the sixth row, are all the same. So that hasn't changed. Everybody pays the same volumetric charge every year. The base charge is still lower, the same percent lower for multifamily, and the base charge for non-residential based on equivalent single-family dwelling units is also the same for single-family and for industrial, non-residential. So we keep the same structure. The only thing we've changed is the base charges and the volumetric charges. And so these are set up in order to generate the percentage increases that we've proposed each year. 9% per year in the first year, actually the first 6 years, 9% per year, and then 8, 7, 6, and 5 in the out years. So now we finally get to some sample bills. It's important to note that how much you pay on your bill directly depends on how much water you use. And therefore, the amount of increase that any customer will see highly depends upon how much water they use. So this table highlights one or two columns, and it's showing, but in general, the leftmost column is the July 1st of the year. Then it shows the fixed rate. So these were rows in the previous table. So you see 77.55, and then numbers increasing over time. Then you see the volumetric rate, that's the third column. And then you start to see now people's water bills based on how much water they've used. So the 2,000 there means 2,000 gallons per month of water purchased from Board of Water Supply. So we do a calculation. We say it's only 80% of that becomes sewage, and then we calculate the volumetric rate based on that. And so what you see is currently the customer that uses 2,000 gallons per month, which is 10% of all customers, is paying $84.96. When the first rate increase goes into effect on July 1st, what we've proposed, it will go up to $87.65, a little less than $3 per month. The next month, it goes up another $2.50 or so, and you see it continues a couple dollars a month as it go through time. Eventually, the increases go up a little bit more. I would note that if this customer qualified for the low-income CARES program, assistance program, they would get $20 to $25 per month off of this. And if you look at it, it would take actually till 2029 before that would mean an actual increase, in their bill if they got the $20 credit. So it would essentially eliminate the bills for the increases for folks who would qualify for the low-income program. The next slide shows a different water user. The one that's highlighted is 9,000 gallons a month. Before I go to that, I want to point out the one that says 6,000. So there's a column there called 6,000. 6,000 is the median water user in the county. What that means is half of people use 6,000 gallons per month or less, and half use more. So that's, there's 140,000 customers, so 70,000 of them are using 6,000 gallons or less, and the other half are using more. And if you look at the, I forgot to point out for the previous one, the 2,000 gallons, that if you take the cumulative total percent increase in their bill, which is the bottom row, the very bottom row, for that low water user, it's 70%. So it's not 115%, it's 70% over the 10 years. If you look at the 6,000 gallon per month person, household, it's 104% if you look at the very bottom. So it's, again, it's not 115%. But people who use more water are paying more, as you'll see. So if you look at 9,000 gallons a month, that's called the average water user. It actually means 70% of people are using that amount or less. 30% are using more. You see what their bill is going to do. Their bill over time is going to go up 124%. Each year, it goes up about $12 per month, $11 or $12 per month. And so that's what they would see, on their bill. This year, it'd go up from 110 to 122, et cetera. And finally, it would show a very high water user. 2% of customers use 30,000 gallons per month or more. It's 15 times as much as the low water user. But you can see that by changing the structure of the bill to make the fixed charge smaller to benefit to promote water conservation, the cost of using water has gone up significantly. And I would point out that this is just like the Board of Water Supply inclining rate fee structure that penalizes high water use. But these customers, if they don't change their ways and use less water, will be paying a lot more over time. And that was the intention of the stakeholder advisory group, and also is in line with promoting water conservation like Board of Water Supply does. Okay, so the last bill slide shows some non-residential bills. These were sort of chosen randomly for certain customers. You can see on the leftmost column, different types of customers. You've got a large shopping center, you have an office building, and you have a hotel. And you can also see how much water they use per month. You can see how many equivalent single-family dwelling units they have. And you can see then their current bills and how their bills will increase over time. And so it does depend, again, on how much water they use, determines how much increase they'll see over the time period. So there's a lot of numbers there. I'm not going to go through them in detail, but if you look at the far right column, you'll see that that large shopping center would be looking overall at a 96.9% increase, the office building 105%, whereas the hotel, which apparently has 405 rooms, is looking at 195% increase. Okay, briefly just show some of the public outreach that we've done. We have been all over the place and in all kinds of media talking about this since October. And so there's a list of some of the places we've been and things we've done, and our web page and our social media outlets. The right side is the flyer that we use that's been widely distributed. It goes to all neighborhood board meetings. And the next slide shows the neighborhood board meetings presentations. This is all 33 neighborhood boards. Not all of them have been visited yet. There are 7 still remaining, including 3 this week, tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday, and then a few next week, and we're just about done with all of the neighborhood boards. We've also had several town hall meetings. As shown here, there have been, I believe, 8 so far. 8 so far, and we have 3 more to go, and you can see the council district that they're in. We will have, in the end, been in all council districts. Okay, this slide shows some of the media, and it's not a complete list of all of the television, newspaper, and other media that sewer fees have been in, and stories have been written, or pieces shown on sewer fees. Okay, so at this point, I'll say mahalo and ask if there's questions. There are a few more slides in your handout, which is a financial analysis by our financial advisors of the impact of potentially of delaying increases or not doing increases, and the effect that would have on our bond ratings and our cost of borrowing money, both for the sewer fund and the general fund. But I think I will not go over those unless you would like to, or we could save it for a future, presentation.
All right, members, any questions? Councilmember Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. Briefly, Mahalo, Director, for the presentation. Has there been any further discussion about making the CARES program more accessible, particularly to multifamily units?
Yeah, thank you for that question. And this program, we've done a lot of research on this program and talked to a lot of other utilities, and it really is a challenge, difficult to figure out a way to benefit, for example, renters and multifamily residential, because you need to, generally it's the conventional way to apply such a program is that it needs to be a customer that's billed, that receives a bill that you can qualify, and then you can do a credit, or essentially a reduction on the bill. Programs where you would qualify somebody and they're not getting a bill would mean that you'd have to somehow write them a check or somehow distribute money to them, which is what was done with the rental and utility relief program, but actually was paid directly to utility, not to the people. So it is a concern, and it is something that we'll continue to look into and try to figure out a way to do that. It presents some really big challenges, though, to do it. But it is important because a lot of the people that would be eligible and need the relief are difficult to figure out a way to benefit them. I hope that answers your question and it makes sense.
Okay, it does. So if anyone gets an individual bill, they would be able to be eligible.
That's correct.
Okay. Okay, mahalo. Just that question, Jared. Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Nishimoto.
Thank you. Director, do you have the breakdown of how you pay for these projects between bonds and fees? Roughly, what is the breakdown?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that is covered in kind of an overall way in the one table that I showed, which, let me find which, capital program is in. It's on rate study step 2.
What page is that?
Let me go back. It's this page. Okay, so most of the capital program is funded by debt, so sewer bond funds. A smaller proportion of the capital program is funded by cash. So cash comes from sewer fee revenue, goes into a cash fund, and then bond proceeds go into a separate account. So they're not mixed because bond funds need to be expended within 2 years, or else you pay what's called arbitrage, because you're earning interest on the money, but you can't borrow the money to earn interest. You need to spend it. So we're careful to spend the money on time. But we do have cash reserve also, and we have to have some cash reserve as part of the bonds and the bond rating and stuff, so you have to have cash. But we're also able to use some of our cash for capital projects. So along here, so basically what you can see is the amount of new debt, which is, I guess it's the 4th row there, and it shows these are new debt service. So that's not the amount of debt we actually issue, but those are the payments, the debt service. And then if you look down to the 2nd row from the bottom, it shows the cash that we've programmed to spend on capital programs over the 10 years. And so those two essentially are what we're spending on capital programs in actual expenditures. The actual value of those projects, the CIP program, is a much bigger number, right? Because we're only paying interest and principal. So yeah.
Is there a reason why you don't fund it all through bonds?
Yeah. So normally it is mostly funded by bonds, but so the cash funds that come in help. By funding it partly with cash, we reduce the amount of rate increases, I think, that are needed over the long term, and so that is part of our strategy.
If the federal government brings back the state and local tax deduction for federal taxes, how would that impact the customers when you're financing things cash versus bonds?
So the federal taxes are based on income and deductions, right? So you can deduct taxes that you pay, but not fees, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So this is a sewer fee that they're paying, right?
This is a fee, yes.
If you paid it everything through bonds, wouldn't they be able to deduct it then?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
Because of the nature, so if all of it was paid, if the entire sewer program was paid through real property tax, then the fees would be deductible, but fees are not deductible.
Right.
With respect to the bonds themselves, they're tax-free municipal bonds, and folks are free to buy those and benefit from the interest. But I think that's the answer to your question.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Cordero.
Hi, Director. I have a question relating to how much the projection would be if we were to wait out for 1 year more, 2 more years, as opposed in comparison to taking on the rate this year.
Yeah, thank you for that question. So this slide shows, I think potentially, at least partially answers your question. The lower table shows, what we've actually proposed, the sort of smoothed out rates. If we were to use slightly smaller increases, say 8%, and by the way, all these would generate the same amount of revenue over the period and meet all of the projected expenses in each year. And it is notable that we do have those big encumbrances in 28 and 29, so that's why they get bigger in those years. But if you do lower 8%, then you need a couple of 10%. If you use 7%, then you need a couple of 12% years and a 10% year. And so the 9s were chosen in order to avoid double-digit increases and sort of smooth it out over time. And then there are some lowest possible numbers in the 2 bottom rows in order to meet all sort of bond covenants and not go into default on our bonds.
Okay, thank you. Director, I have a few questions. First of all, whatever happened to the stormwater utility fee that was discussed a few years ago? Is that still on the table, given that a substantial amount of the liquid that gets to Sand Island and the other places is stormwater?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So stormwater fee is it's actually the proposal was a stormwater utility, and it hasn't been proposed yet to council. It's been in draft, and that group is still working on that proposal, which would fund the separate, storm sewer system from the wastewater system. And so right now there isn't. It hasn't been proposed yet, but it is completely separate.
Okay, but separate. But do they fit together in some way? Are there some of these improvements, say at Sand Island or elsewhere, that could be funded through a stormwater utility fee in future years?
Yeah, thanks for the question. So I think the answer is basically no. It's not related. The services that would be covered under the stormwater utility are separate from the sewer fee. I would mention one thing though, and it was because it was mentioned by Councilmember Tupola, and that is integrated planning. Integrated planning is the meshing together of stormwater and wastewater in terms of funding. So it's an EPA program which allows utilities to consider both programs because they're both NPDES programs, permitted programs that have their own restrictions and requirements, and it allows you to consider both requirements together and then perhaps consider funding, adjusting your funding to get the best value for public health and the environment. But it is noted that integrated planning expressly in the law cannot be used to change a consent decree.
Okay. And then my next question is, you mentioned there's a four-year phase-in for the additional volumetric charges. And I understand, based on your presentation, that there's a concern that there's going to be, some people whose rates would spike as a result of that, and that's why you wanted to have a 4-year phase-in. Is that indeed the case?
That's correct, yeah.
I guess, from my perspective, the people who would have these spikes are the really high users anyway, and so whether they have a spike in 2030 or whether they have a spike, in 26 or 27, I'm not sure why that's super consequential, especially if they're the very high users. Can you walk me through why a 4-year phase-in is necessary, and could we make it perhaps a 2-year phase-in?
Yeah, that's a great question, Councilmember. So we did go through that. There's a lot of iterations that we went through to try and figure it out. And actually, the other option that we spent a lot of time on was a 60-40, because we're 70-30 now. 60-40 is in between that and 50-50. With the 60-40, you only needed a 2-year phase-in period because the changes aren't as much. All I can say is that when we look at all the numbers in the sample bills, it just made it a little more palatable for everybody kind of as a whole to do the 4-year phase-in period. Because even the high water users who are going to see a pretty big penalty over these 10 years, to show your bill really going up a lot in 1 year would just not be nice. There's really no other way to say it. And the 4 years sort of smooths that out and makes it just just feel better.
Yeah, I guess, from my perspective, the lowest user, the 2,000 gallon user, right now is paying about $85 a month. But somebody using 10 times as much water, 20,000, is not even paying twice as much. And so I recognize there are some equity issues here. And for the very high users, I'm sure there may be some reasons why they have very, very high usage. But I just have to think for people who are trying their best to conserve, we want to see what we can do to reward them. So that's just a food for thought. Furthermore, can you explain why we have these big encumbrances in 29 and 30? That was part of your, I guess, previous answer.
Yeah, so that's because of the Sand Island secondary upgrade phase 2. The project needs to be constructed and operational by December 31st, 2035 to comply with the consent decree and avoid daily fines beginning on that day on January 1st of 36. So backing out in terms of when the construction, there's 6 years of construction period. Construction needs to start in 2029. Project needs to be awarded in 2028 in order to get a contract in place and an NTP for the contractor to start work in 2029. That means that we're in final design right now already to finish the design, get all the permits, get everything approved for 2028. When we award in 2028 and 2029 is when we have to have the money. We can't award a contract without appropriating the money. That doesn't mean we borrow all the money at that time. We actually borrow the money to pay it out actually during construction period, right? So we're actually borrowing the money at that time, but we do have to appropriate. So that's why you have that big spike, but it is an appropriation. So that's how that works.
And then one last question, if you could explain, this is the slide 25. This is just the monthly rates if it's 50% fixed, 50% volumetric. Right now, for a single family home, the fixed volumetric charge is $77.55. This is just an illustrative sample, right? And so I'm seeing that in 2026 and 2027, the amount actually goes down.
That's right. It goes down just a little bit.
And that's by design?
Yeah, it's just to make the numbers work. We need to generate the right amount of revenue. You've got all the thousands of customers, and we know how much water they use. And you have to figure out an increase that meets the revenue requirement for that year. And so there's some playing with a spreadsheet to figure out that number of what it needs to be. And so it turns out that it does go down a little bit in those years, just a couple dollars.
And that's because we'd be increasing the volumetric charge.
That's correct, yeah. And then the idea is to keep the proportions the same for single-family residential, multifamily residential, and non-residential, so that they keep corresponding to the amount of water that those customers use, so that the fees generated from each class or category of user remains proportional, directly proportional to how much they use. And
then last question from me, did you do any evaluation of whether more than a 50% volumetric proportion, what that would look like?
We did several scenarios, including doing 100% volumetric, which is essentially what Port of Water Supply uses. Then you get really, really, really big changes. And by the way, we also looked at 100% fixed, right, which we do have now for some customers. But that's really the opposite of incentivizing, conservation. So the way we landed at 50-50 was it is still a pretty big change for people, but it does achieve, some equity, some control over bills, and promoting water conservation without going too far into too big of a change.
Okay, thank you. All right, members, any other questions on this item? I see Councilmember Cordero and then Council Vice Chair Weyer.
Thank you. Director Babcock, if the sewer increase does not get approved this year, what would it look like for the continuation of our consent decree projects?
Yeah, thank you for that question. So actually, if there's no sewer increase this year, I believe we go into default next year with respect to our bonds. I got to check on that, but I'm pretty sure that's the case. Sorry, I'm looking back at Mike O'Keefe, Deputy Director. We do need a sewer fee increase of at least some minimal amount. I've shown the calculated number we had was 2%. I believe that is just to remain solvent with our bond covenants and all our obligations that we have as of today. But you're asking more specifically about Sand Island.
Yes.
Sand Island design is in design, so that's a consulting contract in the long response that we submitted, last night, and it does go through all of those contracts and the amount per fiscal year. I am not positive that if we didn't have a sewer increase or we only had a minimal one, I believe we would still continue with that design process, which needs to be finished, and then construction drawings ready by 2028 so we can bid out that project. So that work will continue.
Thank you.
All right, Vice Chair Weyer.
Thank you, Chair. And just briefly, but I think, Director, you're kind of answering or getting towards my question. So I was just looking at slide 37. I know the arrow is kind of in between, but our wastewater bond program is currently a AA bond rating. Is that what the arrow is saying?
Sorry, it's kind of in between AA and AA+. It's AA2, right? Or there's two different ratings. So there's a Fitch rating and a Standard & Poor's rating. And I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact things, but it's very highly rated. Our bonds are very highly rated, so we qualify for a low interest rate.
Okay.
On the bonds.
Do you know how long we've been at that rating? Has there been movement in the past 5, 10, few years?
No, there hasn't been a lot of movement. It's gone up. It's basically been steady over the recent years.
Okay.
Yeah.
Is there any timeline or information that is relevant to our bond rating and Bill 60 in terms of how quickly we need to come up with some type of plan? Well, you have the proposed plan, so I mean,
yeah,
in terms of passing it and effectuating it.
Yeah, that's a good question. So the slide near the very beginning, which shows the rate history, it was a colorful one. It was a bar chart with a lot of bars on it that says ENV rate history, increase history.
Slide 7 or page 7.
Yeah, so this slide here, yeah. This shows the our most recent. So we do sell bonds every year, and we have to we host the bond rating agencies, Fitch and Standard & Poor, here for visit and do presentations and all kinds of legal documents and stuff. And what they have seen is that we are planning to increase sewer fees. They've seen the 5 years of 9%, and they assumed that in our bond rating that we have now. They haven't seen, the full 10 years or all that's shown on this, but they've seen it cut off there for the first 5 years of 9%, and they did base our rating on that. And I did provide in the final slides that we didn't go through at the end, I did provide some comments from the rating agencies with respect to that. And I can just read those. They're the orange boxes there on the slide right after Mahalo. And the text is really small. But it basically says, if you do those increases, you'll maintain your bond rating, and it's based upon assuming that you would maintain a strong financial position because of these needed rate increases to fund your capital programs, including the consent decree requirements that that they understood and everything that we presented. So that has our bond rating is essentially contingent upon raising the rates as we propose, or some form that meets the revenue requirements that we've outlined.
Is that, so just the last question, Chair. So you're saying that has to be done by the end of this calendar year? Or is there a particular deadline?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Councilmember.
I guess, just to clarify too, that the bill would need to pass and then.
Right.
Yeah.
So we've indicated that rates would increase this coming fiscal year, FY26, which is July 1st. It doesn't necessarily mean it has to, bills have to increase on the 1st, but the 9% or some increase is needed to be collected during that fiscal year. We generally have been selling bonds in the fall, September, the last couple of years. We generally get together with the rating agencies about 2 months before that, when we have to submit lots of things, an official statement and lots of documents, and use the bond counsel and outside counsel and our financial advisors to prepare all that information for the bond rating. And then once the bond rating is in, then we're able to go sell bonds. So what that means is in July-ish, we would be seeking a bond rating again to sell bonds this year. So if we have to tell a different story to the bond rating agencies, that is when it would happen, sometime in July.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you, Director. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, members, any other questions for Director-designate Babcock? Okay, seeing none, stick around. We may have other questions.
Okay.
At this time, I'd like to turn it over to testifiers. We're going to go in reverse order and go with anyone online. Clerks, do you have anyone registered or standing by online to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, we'll turn it over to in-person. Is there anyone registered in person to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, is there anyone standing by here in the chamber to testify? All right, if you come up to the microphone, press the button on the right and identify yourself and then proceed. Again, for those of you following online, the Ms. Yuen's testimony is supplemented by Council Communication 51, which has some information that she'll be presenting to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Aloha. I'm Emma Yuen with the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and I am a Natural Resource Management Specialist, and I don't have any direct expertise in wastewater issues or the budgetary issues in front of you. I'm just here to provide a little information about the EPA's integrated planning process, which is a pathway for compliance codified in the Clean Water Act in 2019. And just from the website, the EPA developed an integrated planning framework that offers a voluntary opportunity for a municipality to develop an integrated plan to meet multiple Clean Water Act requirements. Focusing on each Clean Water Act requirement individually may constrain a municipality from addressing its most serious water quality issues first. The website continues to say that the benefits of this include innovative long-term solutions that reduce pollution sources rather than just controlling or treating discharges, and more cost-effective and affordable infrastructure investments. So Department of Land and Natural Resources has an involvement in the integrated planning process because many of the studies that have been done on water quality indicate that turbidity is a main reason for the majority of Oahu's marine waters to fail to meet the Department of Health water quality standards. And a leading cause of turbidity is runoff from upland areas due to the loss of our native forests and the prevalence of feral pigs and goats that pollute the watershed. And these can be controlled by relatively inexpensive fencing projects. And so to date, more than 24 municipalities have developed integrated plans, and of those, 13 have implemented their plans through a permit, order, or judicial consent decree. I'm not speaking on behalf of the EPA or the consent decree plaintiffs or what is possible or not regarding, the consent decree itself. However, I'm just here to provide the reminder that this is an opportunity to explore the integrated planning process. And the document circulated was developed in 2021 by a nonprofit, and I can't speak to the validity of the information on the wastewater treatment alternatives or cesspool conversions, but it does provide background on the ways that integrated planning could be explored on Oahu, not just for the wastewater upgrade, but also for a variety of Clean Water Act requirements. And so I invite folks who want more information to consult with the EPA Integrated Planning Ombudsman, which is a position specifically created to kind of talk about what is possible or not, and also talk to other municipalities that have gone through this process and are very willing to share ways that they have met their requirements in a more cost-effective way and in a way that really addresses the main causes of pollution. Thank you very much. Aloha.
Members, any questions for Ms. Yun? Councilmember Kiana.
I just want to make a comment. First of all, thank you, Emma, for testifying and actually to coming to my office to talk story. I highly recommend for any other council members who have not gotten to meet with her or I understand there's like an engineering hui that Dr. Michael Chun, formerly of Kamehameha Schools, is involved with. And I think that a lot of the recommendations are things actually being freestanding that we are clearly in support of, including cesspool conversions. But I do want to vouch for, I had the privilege of working with Emma at the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and something that we all support has to do with the, our protecting our forests, both not just ecologically, but also with regard to helping with the retention of water for our water supply. So that's all, Emma. I just wanted, because I do have a question for Dr. Babcock, but I just wanted to thank you for coming to testify. And Chair, if I leave it to you, but I did have a question to Dr. Babcock from this presentation.
Okay, let's see if there's any other questions for Ms. Yun real quick. Going once? Okay. Please proceed with Director-Designate Babcock.
Okay, thank you. Director Babcock, I know you and I have talked about this, but since this is a public hearing, I wanted to just have everyone else hear it as well. A lot of the thought pattern behind the integrated planning process for clean water on Oahu clearly is music to all of our ears. And if there's a way to consider this as you meet the demands of the consent decree, I guess I just wanted to ask what your thoughts are on it in front of my colleagues as well as the general public. And although I know you told me that it still can't stop what is going on, I'm just wondering what about the integrated planning approach can be incorporated into your overall planning?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the question, Council Member, and thank you, Emma from DLNR. We've been talking about integrated planning for many years with respect to these programs and the need to deal with polluted runoff, surface water runoff, and problems with contribution of brown water from our forested areas and our conservation lands. So integrated planning is a very interesting program, and it is important. First thing I'll mention is that we did commission and complete an integrated planning feasibility study that was written for us by a consulting firm. It involved a bunch of workshops with ENV department, wastewater, with DFM, stormwater, with the State Department of Health, and various other stakeholders. The plan, the feasibility plan, which was preliminary to doing a full integrated plan, was to determine whether or not, to proceed with the full plan, and to identify potential projects and things that could benefit from an integrated planning approach. And I know it's been mentioned, the word's been mentioned quite a few times and what it means. But what it means is municipality, it was set up because of municipalities had very, very strict NPDES permits coming for sewer, and very, very strict NPDES permit requirements coming for stormwater. They both have NPDES permits. Wastewater plants all have, we have an NPDES permit, and the city has an NPDES permit for all the streams and all runoff. And these were not talking to each other and having all kinds of increasing restrictions and financial impacts of required projects to do each one. Integrated planning was to say, okay, we need to have some things looked at together to see whether we're spending the money in the best way to have the biggest impact. And because sewer projects are very expensive, stormwater projects are very expensive, so what do you do that benefits, has the best benefit with your dollars? I would point out one thing up front, and that is that one of the goals, and we tried to identify projects that would do this, where we could not spend some sewer money and spend it on something that benefits stormwater. The important thing to point out there is it doesn't decrease spending. You're just spending money, on something different. And if you have a consent decree, you still got to do the consent decree. Okay, so it's very clear in the guidance, and we do have a letter, from EPA, and there's an ombudsman, and said, nope, there's no way it cannot eliminate or change, the consent decree. That is a court thing that's agreed in court, and it's based on a bunch of other stuff. It's settled other lawsuits. It's a federal judgment with, the U.S. Department of Justice. It can't open that up and change that, but it can perhaps change other projects. And but the key is that those other projects, you still got to spend the money somewhere. So it isn't a way to spend less money. It's a way to spend money on different things, perhaps. So that would be a change. So that is one of the things that was pointed out in our integrated plan, feasibility study. At this point, but we did identify some potential projects that could essentially be delayed. So again, while you can't change a consent decree, which is a legal order, you can delay other anticipated water quality, changing regulations and things that are coming in the future that you know about, that you could push projects that are maybe really expensive with a small benefit and do something instead with stormwater that would have a bigger benefit. But you still got to spend the money. So it doesn't necessarily provide a savings. But we are in the process of determining whether to continue with our full integrated planning study. And because we do think that there's some potential there, but we will have to, in order to do those projects, we would have to in order to divert money, we would have to come back to council.
Okay, follow up. Can we get the interim feasibility study, the preliminary feasibility study?
Definitely, yes.
Okay, and then second, you don't need funds for the full. Are you able to do that within the next year?
We, well, actually, the study usually takes a little longer than that. Even the feasibility was more than a year, but
okay.
Yeah, but we can start it in this coming fiscal year.
Okay.
And yeah.
Okay, and it won't cost extra money, and you have a wealth of information not only with the relevant agencies, city and state that you talked about, but a cadre of experts in the field who want to step up and be part of your stakeholder groups when you guys finish it. I think I would welcome that in the full integrated planning study to be completed. And I do believe that proposals like what we are doing with the Climate Resiliency Fund, I know what you're saying about big costs, but every little aspect of helping with funding components of the integrated planning process is a good thing. and to potentially have $9 million from the Resiliency Fund to be able to help in that regard is positive. So we are all looking for ways to mitigate the proposed increases that you guys are laying out. And it's hard for our communities to fathom that. And we know that we have to make difficult choices, but I just want to make sure that against that backdrop, we have this integrated planning process at the back of our minds to see how we could help to supplement your efforts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, let's see, we've gone through testimony. Anyone else in the chamber wanting to testify? All right, please come up to the microphone, press the right side, and please proceed.
I came in a little late, so I wasn't able to sign up. My name is Roy Abe. I'm a retired civil engineer specializing in wastewater. And Emma Yun actually called me up at 7:30 this morning and thought, oh, maybe I should attend this, so I came. And I've been working with Emma a long time, at least 4 years or more. And yeah, we share similar views. First of all, I want to say that I have tremendous respect for Dr. Babcock. I've known him from when he was at the UH being a professor. I lectured in his class and served as a mentor of some of his design classes. So I think he's doing a good job. I'm not here to oppose the rate increase. I think the city does need money. I recently retired in January, but I have 45 years of consulting experience in wastewater. I've done a lot of wastewater projects for the city. I worked with them and so on. And they've been my good clients over the years. I've been working on this secondary treatment waiver from almost the start of my career. I helped prepare the waiver application. Sorry. If I can continue, yeah. I started my career preparing the waiver application, responded to EPA comments and so on. City did get the waiver in the 80s. And then they had problems getting the waiver again in 2010 and so on. A lot of it is just communication issues. In the 80s, when we worked on the waiver, we had the cooperation and understanding of all the environmental groups. They supported the waiver. They understood why we needed a waiver. And you need to understand the difference between primary and secondary treatment. Primary treatment takes out the floatables and settables, which impact the benthic, the organisms in the coastal waters. And secondary treatment is a biological treatment process. It takes up more of the organics, which is a problem with lakes and streams because it consumes oxygen. We don't have that problem in the deep ocean. And one document that, if you haven't read, is 10 years of monitoring from the UH University. They did 10 years of monitoring and found no impacts with primary treatment. And I remember when EPA requested testimony in about 2008 or 2010, we had like 50 testifiers. Almost everyone supported the waiver.
And Mr. Abe, if you could summarize.
Okay, so anyway, the bottom line is that even the James Monker was with the UH. He said spending even $1 on secondary treatment is not justified because there are no benefits. So that's the bottom line. And yeah, I'm here as a resource. If you have questions, I'd be happy to provide more information. I've been working with Dr. Michael Chan, Emma Yuen, James Kumogai, who's one of the pioneers in this field. So I was recently retired, so now I can speak more freely. I know city administration didn't want to pursue opening the consent decree, and I think maybe that's something that should be looked at, renegotiating the consent decree.
Thank you. Members, any questions for Mr. Abe? All right, seeing none, is there anyone else in the chamber who'd like to testify? Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion. I think we've had a pretty thorough introduction to all of these topics through this, and we're going to keep on working on this. I think there are a lot of other areas where members are going to have questions. So, Councilmember Kiana.
Can I say something? And thank you for agendizing this for discussion. Dr. Babcock has actually been at all of the major neighborhood board meetings in my district, so I appreciate that. I need to let you know for the testifiers, I'm sorry, but opening up the consent decree is a very delicate process. For me right now, I'm going to have to trust Dr. Babcock, but also we just discussed today a full, for a process to look at an integrated planning process, not just a feasibility study. And I think that would be helpful. For me, what I'm looking for is other ways to meet the objectives of the consent decree through integrated planning. So I myself am not advocating for them to be looking at this. And given the challenges that we're facing, not just at the federal level, but across the world, for not only states and cities, but nation states to be grappling with the significant changes going on. This is not a time to be dabbling with that. So that's all I want to say. So if you are looking for at least a better integrated planning to be part of this process, that's what I'm looking at. Thanks.
Thank you. Members, any other discussion? Okay, hearing none, thank you all. All right, next item is agenda item number 8, resolution 25-53, authorizing a transfer of $4,875,000 in general fund monies from the administrative services activity, salaries, character of expenditure, to the support services activity for fiscal year 2025 to cover equipment procurements for the acquisition of police vehicles and fuel management system replacement. We have with us a representative from the Honolulu Police Department, Major Ryan Hironaka. Major, if you'd like to comment.
Good morning, Chair Dos Santos-Tam and Vice Chair Nishimoto. I am Ryan Hironaka. I'm Major with the Honolulu Police Department's Finance Division. With this resolution, the Honolulu Police Department is requesting to transfer $4,875,000 from its fiscal year 25 operating budget, specifically from the salaries of the administrative services activity. And these funds will go to the current expense and equipment expenditures in the support services activity. These funds will be used to purchase police vehicles and a fuel management system. For a little bit more background, these funds come from cost savings in administrative services activity that were for recruits, but those positions are vacant, so it'll be a cost savings. And the movement of these funds will not impact police operations in any way.
Okay, members, any questions for the Major? Okay, seeing none. Clerks, is there anyone registered to testify or standing by to testify on this item, either in person or remotely?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion on this item. If there's no discussion, I just want to make one point. I appreciate all the work that HPD does. I guess some of the frustrations that the council has with the HPD budgeting processes, especially when it came to the community policing team, we as a council tried to put in money, and I understand there's some issues in dealing with that. So I hope that through next year's budget, or this upcoming budget process, that we can iron those out, so that way the money that we give you is easily expendable.
Yes, sir. So we appreciate any funds and monies that were given, and we work to improve within the parameters to spend the funds that were given.
Thank you. All right, members, any further discussion? Okay, hearing none, the chair recommends that resolution 25-53 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, Major. We have up next agenda item number 9. This is resolution 25-70, accepting a gift of transportation, lodging, and registration fee with an estimated value of $2,800 to the city from the National Association of State Procurement Officials, NASPO, for one staff member from the city and county of Honolulu to attend the NASPO Exchange Conference and Training event in Las Vegas, Nevada from March 3rd through 6th, 2025. We have with us the Deputy Director of the Department of Budget and Fiscal Services, who perhaps has some comments.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Dos Santos-Tam, Vice Chair Nishimoto, and Honorable Councilmember Weyer. Carrie Castle, BFS Deputy Director. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on Resolution 25-70. We are very fortunate that we have someone that the National Association of State Procurement Officials are meeting in Las Vegas this week. And the purpose of this conference is to share best practices. We have vendors that also participate in this conference, and that's really an important point for us right now. We are sending our Central Purchasing and Contract Administrator, Paula Youngling, and part of her, I guess, why it's so important for her attending this conference at this moment is that we are, many of you heard that we are in the process of improving our procurement process. And so this gives her an opportunity to meet vendors, potential vendors that we could possibly engage. She's already has meetings lined up with several vendors. Her calendar is full as far as meeting with potential vendors that we could engage to help us with our procurement application should we, desire to look at different applications.
Okay. Members, any questions for Deputy Director Castle?
Chair.
Oh, Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you. Hi, Deputy Director Castle. Thank you very much for sharing that information. I really appreciate hearing that this is going to be occurring. I also was wondering, in addition to vendors, is the department making headways for relationships with not just vendors, but I guess best practices with other financing agencies from across the nation on best implementations for procurement as well?
Yes, absolutely, Chair Cordero. Councilmember Cordero. That's also a very great benefit that she will engage with colleagues as well as other jurisdictions, and as you said, look at best practices.
And is your department looking at other, whether it be conferences or opportunities like this for your procurement team to be attending?
Right now, this is one of the key conferences that takes place. So at the moment, this, because it's imminent and actually happening right now, we thought it was important for our contract administrator to attend. But we, through part of this procurement improvement working group, we are looking and communicating with other jurisdictions, other experts, including the state of Hawaii, looking at how they do things as well as other county jurisdictions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll turn now to testimony. Clerks, is there anyone standing by here in the chamber or registered in the chamber or standing by or registered remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion. Any discussion on this item? Okay, seeing none, the chair recommends the resolution 25-70 be adopted and reported out, be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, we are almost done, members. We're coming up on the light at the end of this long meeting tunnel. All right, agenda item number 10. This is Resolution 25-56, establishing a tax increment financing permitted interaction group to discuss and explore the city's potential use of tax increment financing. We have with us Deputy Director Castle. If she has any comments. I know the department submitted written testimony.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you for allowing us to submit our comment and submit our testimony regarding this resolution. We are in support of forming a permitted interaction group to discuss tax increment financing. And we welcome, learning more about this avenue in which we can raise revenue.
Okay, members, any questions for Deputy Director Castle? Okay, Councilmember Cordero.
Thank you. Hi, Deputy Director Castle. Thank you very much for your testimony. I was just wondering if the city administration is aware of the Hawaii Revised Statute subsection 46-103, the establishment of tax increment district, which allows any county council to provide for tax increment financing by approving a tax increment financing plan and adoption of an ordinance.
Yes, Councilmember Cordero, we understand that. Appreciate your insight.
Okay, and so has I know that it states with the county council, but since this passed last year, was the department preparing for any further deliberation on such a topic or matter?
We would, again, welcome the permitted interaction group so we can learn more, get input from experts with respect to TIFs.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Āina.
I'm just trying to better understand the concept and follow up from Councilmember Cordero's question. So with regard to the authority for establishing a tax increment financing, I'm sorry, is it this? What is the source? Is it the state constitution? What is the source that do that? Are we able to unilaterally do that?
I believe so. Councilmember.
Okay, thank you. And Chair, I will withhold my comments until the discussion.
All right. Members, any other questions? Okay. Seeing none, we'll turn to testimony at this time. We do have a registered in-person testifier, James Sung. And if you could hit the right side button, there we go.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, council members. My name is James Sung. I was the one that actually brought this idea up to Councilmember Tyler Santos-Tam. The reason why I did it was because you guys have about a bunch of whats you guys want to do. And I was bored and I was trying to figure out how you guys are going to implement all this stuff. And with your climate resiliencies, the e-bike, the traffic fatalities, how do we incorporate everything that you guys have and be able to do how are we going to implement it? And knowing how the TIFs work, TIF zones, everything is able to, basically we're able to take a zone and we're able to revitalize it into your what's and be able to implement it. We'll be able to implement sustainability, be able to redo things. So, am I done?
Yeah, if you could summarize.
But basically, this is my implementation of it. I did submit a written testimonial. Please read it. It talks about ethical things that I see that's coming up. And also, as you guys move forward, I hope you guys include me in this conversation if I'm able to join the pig or whatever this thing is.
Okay, thank you. Members, any questions? Okay, seeing none, is there anyone else here in the chamber who would like to testify? Don't all rush to the podium. Okay, clerks, is there anyone registered remotely or standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, seeing none, members, we are in discussion on this item. Councilmember Āina.
Chair, thank you so much, and thank you for yourself and Councilmember Cordero for introducing this. I believe that anything we could do to help on the real property tax front to help our communities would be beneficial. I simply would love to see this permitted interaction group legislation broadened at the next hearing. So I just wanted to let you know that because, and then depending on the time frame, I know the timing of the broader permanent interaction group might be dependent on other measures moving forward, because I know that some council members are worried that if a PIG is formed, that their individual legislation can't be moving forward. So having said that, I guess if this moves forward, I would like to probably make an amendment when it comes back to budget. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And to that point, I appreciate it. All of the other issues are still also, there's vehicles going. There's not currently a TIF vehicle. So I think we'd be okay discussing this and also all of the other property tax items that are alive, so to speak. But I appreciate those comments for sure. Members, further discussion? Okay. There being no further discussion, what I wanted to do was propose that there be 3 council members as part of the PIG. That is former Budget Chair Cordero, myself, and the Budget Vice Chair, Councilmember Nishimoto. Also a member to be designated by BFS, a member to be designated by DPP because this involves the planning in and around the rail area, and then a member to be designated by UHERO, who's done some studies into TIF and how all of this would work. So that would be my recommendation for filling in the blanks, so to speak. That being the case, as discussed, the chair recommends that Resolution 25-56 be amended as discussed. Any discussion, objections, or reservations to that recommendation? Okay, seeing none, the resolution's been amended. It goes through one reading and then it goes to full council. So this would go to full council. This also does not preclude us from doing other pigs. There will be a whole farm worth of pigs. A whole sty of pigs. Anyway, all right, Resolution 2556 having been amended to a CD1, the chair then recommends that a Resolution 25-56 CD1 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, or reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. All right, we have a few items left. Up next is Resolution 25-61, approving the write-off of delinquent and uncollectible accounts owed to the city. We have with us the Deputy Director of BFS, Carrie Castle.
Thank you, Budget Chair Dos Santos-Tam. Carrie Castle, Deputy Director with Budget and Fiscal Services. Thank you for allowing me to comment on this Resolution 25-61, approving the write-off on uncollectible accounts. These write-offs include very old accounts that our respective divisions or departments have made every effort through collection calls, letters, so forth to go after these delinquent accounts. And after much effort, it has been deemed that what we propose in terms of this resolution are a handful of uncollectibles that we can no longer collect.
Okay. Members, any questions for the Deputy Director of BFS? Okay. Seeing none. Clerks, is there anyone who is registered to testify on this, either in person or remotely, or standing by either here in the chambers or remotely to testify on this item?
Chair, there are none.
Okay. There being none, members, we are in discussion on this item. Any discussion on Resolution 25-61? All right. There being no discussion, the chair recommends a Resolution 25-61 be reported out for adoption. Any discussion, objections, or reservations with regard to that recommendation? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, we are on our last item, and actually we're doing pretty good on time. Given that this is a fairly long agenda, this is the last item. This is a review and evaluation of the Grants and Aid Advisory Commission pursuant to Ordinance 17-44, codified as Chapter 3, Article 15, Revised Ordinances of Honolulu. The purpose of this item is so that the Budget Committee can review and evaluate the Commission and make recommendations to the full Council on whether the charter provisions establishing the Commission should be retained, amended, or repealed. We do have Departmental Communication 133, which was submitted to us. And we have with us the Director Designate of the Department of Community Services, Anton Krucky. We also have the Executive Assistant from the Department, Shane Akagi.
Thank you, Chair, for allowing me to testify. Vice Chair, members of the Council of the Committee, Anton Krucky, Director Designate, Department of Community Services. So this is submitted by our Chair of the Commission, as the ordinance requires, and I've brought along Shane Akagi, Administrator of the Grants Management Office, in case there are any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Okay. Members, any questions for the Department of Community Services? Councilmember Kiana.
So, and then, Chair, I just want to make sure this is just a review, but this is not a measure of making recommendations, correct?
Correct. We will have a report at a future meeting.
Okay, so I just wanted to make sure, I'm just reading the notes from my staff. So is the advisory committee or the commission, is it recommending that we do away with the council-specific dollar amount and leave it to the commission to be awarding it island-wide? So instead of the $250,000 each district, it's is the commission recommending that we abolish that?
Thank you for your question, Councilmember Kiana. Budget Chair Dos Santos-Tam, Shane Akagi, Administrator of the Office of Grants Management. The commission was asking about removing the specific and exclusive requirement. There still is a requirement that there's $250,000 allocated to each council district. And the reason for that is they felt that going strictly by score is more equitable because, and it's a concern that's been brought up in previous years by the commission, because sometimes we do have organizations that are specific and exclusive that are scoring fairly low in the hierarchy of scores, and that's the only reason why they were requesting that.
Yeah, so you're confirming what I thought then, right?
Yes.
Okay, I'm adamantly opposed to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Members, any other questions for the department? Okay, I do have one question with regard to the federal cuts that have been in the news. A lot of nonprofits have been affected. Do you anticipate that many of the applicants from the GIA process that's gone to the city, do you think they'll have greater needs as a result? And the corollary to that is, do you think our current GIA process as it stands right now is flexible and responsive enough to provide them with an infusion of funding if they lose federal funding?
Well, that's a question that's where you are at in the process, if you will. You know, where we're heading, you know, is kind of uncertain waters, although there are things you can see, and I can talk to that in some detail, but everybody's trying to extrapolate at this point, so it's not known. I don't think the GIA process, the commission puts in its recommendations and they rank them. Once that's done and then you review that and you make any adjustments that you make, then that's set. And so it isn't flexible after that point. But I just want to recommend that sometimes the council, you can make adjustments to those recommendations that the commission makes on its road to finalizing.
Okay, thank you. All right, members, any other questions? Okay, Hearing none, at this point, we'll move to testifiers. Clerks, is there anyone who's registered to testify either in person or remotely, or standing by either here in person or remotely?
Chair, there are none.
Okay, there being none, members, we are in discussion. Just as a reminder, this will come back via a more formal report. Okay, there being no further discussion, the chair recommends that action on this matter be postponed to a date and time to be determined by the chair. In the interim, the chair will take the matter under advisement and prepare a draft report and recommendations for consideration at that future meeting. Any discussions or objections to that recommendation or any reservations? Okay, hearing none, so ordered. Members, we have reached the end of our agenda. It's 12:01. We missed it by 1 minute. I want us to be done by noon, but all right, not to belabor it, meeting's adjourned.